Hello everyone and welcome back to Fight Night Legends EU Seasonal Smackdown Edition. This is going to be the last one we're going to squeeze in before this upcoming seasonal, and this is going to be one more chance for these competitors to get some last minute meta, perhaps, data when they're assuming and constructing their lineups for a big tournament as well. So really excited for this one, and the Panda's Wrath has carried us for another week. Still a little bit less Aurelia Azir today, mysteriously.
There is at least one though. There wasn't any last time, so we were kind of going on the downward trend. But still, I think we can't complain. Still a lot of spice coming in. The players. These are competitors that have been in seasonals, of course. That's the name, seasonal Smackdown. So very high tier, high caliber players that are still bringing, some spicy lists and just some innovation still. And also just, like you said, a testing ground for decks like Thralls, for example, that are on the upward trend, both on ladder and in a competitive standpoint as well. So yeah, I think it's gonna be cool to see just the display that these players have for us today.
Thralls is a deck that really does need some testing. It took a very long time before players would become confident enough, I think, to bring it to tournaments seriously. And now it needs to, get a lot more research done into the format. But speaking of which, the format for this tournament is going to be a double elimination bracket with our 8 invited players. All matches are best of 3, with players bringing 2 decks that do not overlap regionally. And then to win the match, the player has to win with both of the decks that they brought. This is a double elimination tournament once again. So that means that if a player is able to fight their way through the lower bracket and then win in the finals, it will be a bracket reset. And then the 2 finalists will play another best of 3. And they're going to be fighting over our classic $200 total prize pool for the top 4, with the top 2 being invited back.
Now let's look now at the players and the bracket for today. We have Den versus M8 Asher. So a French, always a civil wars in the quarterfinals, but a French civil war happening right there to start things off. We have Trish Fangirl 69 against Raxitos, 2 very well-known names, I think. Trish Fangirl from Norway, of course, with the best name in Runeterra, and Raxitos, the resident deep expert from Spain. Then we have Hipster Waldo, last seasonal champion in EU, against Pepsi Cola, one of the most known names in the EU scene after the win with Portugal in the EU Masters. And Hipster Waldo, of course, from Germany. And, again, another seasonal champion, Petish from seasonal number 2, against Gamebreaker, one of the best and most known players from Germany. So like we said before, seasonal Smackdown and just a super, super stacked roster, all premier tournament names, players that have won big Riot tournaments or have made it to the top 4 and gotten very far many, many times.
These players, we're going to be seeing them, for pretty much the rest of Runeterra's lifespan. They're going to be topping seasonals, qualifying for worlds, and just seeing them being able to compete here now, you're just going to get a nice sneak preview of tournaments to come, and probably, honestly, the upcoming seasonal as well. The lineups that are being brought today, especially considering Hipster Waldo, who is sticking with the same strategy that he won the seasonal with, which is bringing a anti-TLC lineup, which I think is very interesting. He likes Rocket Tom Kent, which is, a very hipster deck. It's one of those lists like Lee Sin, where if you've been playing it for a very long time, you're considered a specialist on it. You can not only you're confident to bring it, but you know how to construct the rest of your lineup around the deck to properly support it and cover its bad matchups, and pull off those miracles in sometimes matches where you aren't heavily favored. And Peps Cola, the young one, still popping off, still making a name for himself. It's honestly, you can't even say making a name for himself. He has made a name for himself. Still just showing everybody how it's done, not and just innovating. Not like one of these normally younger players you see, they jump into a new game, they are really good at being brought up to speed, playing the decks that are very strong. But Peps Cola, takes what he likes and makes it strong, makes it the meta. One of the original innovators of Mono Targon Invoke, just ultra value style lists, and has brought a little bit of that today, moving over to Ruben's Pile. And this, once I thought about it a little deeper, I realized this kind of makes sense as like the new style of that. Still has the same amount of like small chumpy bodies, resource generation, invoking, getting these bigger elusive win conditions in the late game. But because you don't have like atrocity and whatnot for finishers, we've got Get Excited, Submersible, and Vi to maybe cover that a little bit. And so playing a slower, more methodical, value-based game, I think Peps Cola could be one of the players that finally convinces us that Ruben Pyle is maybe deserves to get a little bit more respect.
And we've seen lots of different versions of this deck as well. We've seen in the EU Masters, we saw Finland playing it with Tri-Beam, for example. So there is room for kind of experimenting with the current shell. But yeah, very strong deck. It's been especially strong in the right hands. I think it's a deck that offers a lot of decision making, and similar to many Felios and a lot of target-based decks that maybe didn't have the highest win rate on ladder, but in the right hands could become a monster because they have a very even matchup spread, and you're able to adapt to different matchups and find winning lines against almost anything. So I think that's the key part here. Has lifesteal, of course, as well with the Fangs to offer some play against aggro as well with Thermal Beam and just a lot of different nice removal as well. So yeah, again, very, very strong list. Ruben obviously made it very, very popular, getting #1 on NA with this list, and now we're seeing it in EU Masters and in a tournament like this one as well.
Yeah, if a player like that and one of the developers is piloting this, it did take a long time for people to kind of figure it out, find the mixture that works for them, as you mentioned, the flexibility, and I think that we'll maybe see this just kind of go up the same way we've seen Thralls really come into its own for the tournament scene. And when we jump over to Hipster Waldo, he's got his classic Soraka Tom Kench. And this list I really like. So, Tom Kench Soraka is a deck that has some pretty polarized matchups, right? It feels like the sort of deck where you win against it or you don't win against it. I was very shocked to see that there's actually only one Nasus Thresh, I believe, brought to today's tournament. And so the weakness to Fearsome that list might be able to exploit with Merciless Hunter and Bakai Reaper really isn't going to be as pronounced. And notably, I do love the inclusion of the star shaping. This list is something that probably has wanted star shaping, just like every other Targon deck has for such a long time. And I think it's just been very stubborn about including it. So I like that Hipster Waldo is also bringing the star shaping just for, so you don't have to rely purely on Broadback Protector, mostly in Guiding Touch for your Nexus healing. You have a little bit of emergency, and an extra win condition never hurt anybody.
Exactly. I think that's the key thing as well here. Like you said, they're very polarized matchups. Against some matchups, you have a very hard time pushing through damage. You're getting, if there's landmark removal, you're kind of stumped. You don't really have a great alternate win condition. But now with star shaping, at least you have, a one of. It gets you good heals. It gives you a better matchup against aggro, but it also gives you, like you said, maybe an elusive win condition, maybe just a great beyond later on. So it does, I think, add a little bit more to the deck as well.
And as time goes on, who knows if this deck will get maybe one or two more cards, maybe a rework. And we've seen it. We've seen the deck actually evolve because it used to be way more popular on ladder and in tournaments. And the Zenith Blade, Star Shepherd, like OTK sort of builds aren't really a thing anymore. But with that all being said, we're going to jump into the first game. Peps Cola's second deck being put on display here. It's a Sivir Nectin deck with Demacia. So a little bit of that, the Sivir Garen was a anti-TLC tech from way back when, And we know that Silver Renekton Overwhelm in Freljord has been a thing for a while, so maybe Pepsi going for the best of both worlds here. Hipster Waldo bringing Aurelia Azir, which, you know, makes him the hipster of today's tournament, ironically. And starting off with Rockhopper, just going to get a pretty cheeky 3 damage at the start. The Roiling Sands isn't going to have a huge impact in this game usually. With the Dancing Blades, the Sand Soldiers, things like Dune Keeper, it's pretty easy to eat those up and make sure you save it against the targets you don't want it to hit.
Well, in this case, it will be hitting Aurelia, a pretty awkward hand. I did see a sparring student in hand to start saying, oh, I think it was Mulligan, which is kind of confuses me a little bit in terms of the early curve. But right away, we don't have a 1-drop. We have a 3-drop where you have Aurelia attacking, and then you just have a lot of spells in hand. So a bit of an awkward hand to start things off for Hipster Waldo. Maybe that is, you know, the natural punish for bringing Azir Aurelia to the tournament. But for Pepsi, everything seems to be going pretty well. Has a nice curve to start things off. Has a vulnerable unit for next turn. And yeah, the hand looks like it has a good curve as well.
The beatdown is going to be pretty substantial here, right? Like, Renekton is similar to Shyvana in these types of matchups where you throw a bunch of tokens at him, then he's going to level up and just come swinging right back at you with massive overwhelm damage. Hipster Waldo mulliganing a sparring student was a pretty ballsy decision, and I think that, you know, just trying to hard mulligan for Azir, Deus, try to get the early setup, and then maybe play this as a more explosive combo-oriented deck might be the way. We didn't get a chance to directly analyze this list, but he's running the Voices of the Risen, like the new, slightly more experimental version, and with Rite of Calling, much more focused on champions, much more focused on getting, like, the really devastating double Deus curve that the list is truly known for. So we'll see. I think based on the hand here, Hipster Waddle does need to protect this Aurelia. It does stink because you're going to take the full overwhelm damage now from the vulnerable, but is Homecoming the way?
And using any kind of, you know, Blade Dance effect now here, while Renekton has the extra stats for this turn, is going to help Renekton maybe level up very, very quickly off the strike effects. Regardless of it, you know, normally just it's 2 different attack token turns, but against Azir Aurelia, that might not be the case.
I wonder how extensively Pepsi was able to test this deck against Azir Aurelia, or if this is just, you know, one thing that sometimes it gets to luck out and do with the early Renekton.
And there is the level up. That being said, Homecoming probably will be a solution at taking away, you know, a lot of attack coming in on the next attack token turn. Attack token now for Hipster Waldo. We'll see what he can make of it. The pressure isn't really there just yet. There's no Azir level up. Still 16 HP for Pepsi. Sure, there's a lot of units being summoned, and Aurelia might level up soon, but not having Azir, not having any way to buff these units or the tokens is not going to make it, I think, too scary here for Pepsi.
Substantial curve from Pepsi to punish this. The slow play of the Aurelia just wasn't enough to keep up with this tempo. With no ways to buff these blades, really no tricky stuff happening. It's going to be pretty difficult, right? We had the Homecoming potentially to return the Aurelia to hand and potentially save us from the Renekton leveling up, but that's just not going to be the case here. Even Honored Lord coming down without the proc, just to have that extra body is all you need. Not enough mana really to even do any combo-oriented turns here. After the nerfs, Aurelia Azir really definitely feels the impact a lot more of when it draws a slower hand like this. The hand from Hipster Waddle is very reactive.
And you would have loved to see a Golden Aegis in hand before this Honored Lord came down. A rally effect there would have been fantastic for 4 mana, of course, so Notify would not be able to do anything about it, but it is not there. Just going to try and, again, not take too much damage here. And do you really see a way in which Hipster Waldo at 5 HP can survive next turn?
I mean, like, going into seeing what the mana is, you can manipulate. Its Homecoming becomes a bit of a troll chant, right? Sometimes where you can Frankenblock one thing and then send their biggest target back to their hand, like the Renekton or something, and you can survive for another round. But Aurelia is leveling up. She did get the Blade Surge. We talked about how far behind Aurelia was, but Pepsi is down to 8 HP. Keeping the board alive, sacrificing the Nexus health in terms of a board is very important here, and we will see, you know, if this Homecoming will Hipster Waldo survive one more rep.
Yeah, that's going to be GG. I mean, even with the bounce on the Renekton, you had Concerted Strike to kind of counter Homecoming if it was played, and you had the +200 Predator as a burst speed, just attack bonus buff as well. So, yeah, Azir has, we mentioned, a very weak hand to start things off. Not really enough pressure, no Azir. We mentioned now with Inspiring Marshal being nerfed, you kind of have to have these very key cards early on to really mount enough pressure. And Pepsi had a perfect curve. Really, there was no interaction against his very beefy Overwhelm units. He was able to control the board pretty well. And yeah, just capitalize and end the game on turn 6 very quickly.
Yeah, the Renekton leveling up was very surprising, right? Just bam, as soon as you hit the board, leveled up, and you have that overwhelm damage coming through. Overwhelms, as we know, like the Silver Renekton Sejuani, has had like a classically strong matchup against Aurelia Azir, and just some of these chumpy decks that like some of the more aggressive things that have come out to try to counter it, and you get a little bit of both. I like it here with the Silver Renekton here, but now we get to see how Aurelia Azir does into Ruben's Zoo here, the Zoe Vi. It's going to be a very aggressive list versus something that wants to sustain, wants to just outvalue. We've got a nice early game with the Mystic Shot, the Zoe, and the Fangs. And we'll see if this is going to be enough, because we've seen it before, Panda, that you can heal for as much as you want, but eventually the blades just become too much to handle. And there it is, Deus and Azir. This is probably going to be like night and day going into this second game here, with Hipster Waldo having a much more aggressive hand.
Attack token on 3 as well, so I mean, all these things do end up mattering quite a bit for a deck that really capitalizes very early on every single turn being as massive and as pressure-inducing as possible, and that will be the case this time compared to last time. Definitely, I think, an increase in the speed that will be applied here by Hipster Waldo.
And Azir on 3, I think that this is a really strong idea. Hipster Waldo really doesn't need to worry about much here. I guess by summoning Dunekeeper, you do get an extra body on top of your attack token here, especially with potentially the Ribbon Dancer. Trying to take advantage, I think, of Pepskull only having one unit in play. Zoe, a unit that really doesn't want to be sacrificed.
Yeah, and just until Azir levels up, he's not going to be that important to have him on the board. If you were to play Azir now, you get the extra value of summoning one more Sand Soldier, so you would want to play it, on curve when possible. But Dunekeeper is really the same thing at this point, so it's going to be the same amount of summons happening. You're not falling behind in terms of that little race there as well. But yeah, right away, full attack comes in. Azir, the moment he comes down next turn, I think he'll be very close to being leveled up already. And this also removes him from being vulnerable, at least for a little bit longer. If there is any kind of removal, it might help as well. Being able to play him next turn after mana is spent from Pepsi, and then just going to attack the turn after.
Yeah, Hipster Waldo did avoid, was respecting a Thermogenic Beam earlier, and so I do like there is that understanding of how important Azir is in this matchup. That, yeah, you can play him down on curve, maybe get a Sand Soldier, but if you play him out, he gets answered, then you're going to be feeling the pain. And this turn, you can even set up Green Glade Duo. Pepskull is just going to attack here, doesn't want to give anything away, keeping that 5 mana open, threatening the Azir with potential Thermogenic Beam. Just going to float. Now you have some spell mana to work with, keep yourself flexible, and now you're on round 5. You have mana for second Deus and Azir. Things are really coming together for Hipster Waldo here in game 2. Pepskull has tons of things to work with in hand, but has been playing this slow. Just threatening a removal spell against the Azir to delay Hipster Waldo by a couple rounds might help, but you're only delaying the inevitable. Eventually, these cards will be drawn and they will be set up. Pepskull doesn't have a way to really answer these Emperor's Deuses. You can get Falling Comet to answer this 2-mana card, but Hipster Waldo just goes for the open attack.
Yeah, the Azir coming down with 8 mana, still on Pepsi's side, is a bit sus. I think the Azir might be dying in that case, to a Thermo Beam. There's certain cards that could do it. And Green Glade Duo attacking into Zoe, really not going to help, not going to push through damage, even with, a boost to his attack. It'll just be chump blocked by Zoe if the need is there for Pepsi. So a bit of an awkward spot for Hipster Waldo, maybe playing a bit too patiently, maybe playing too safe, and not really capitalizing on the, advantages he had. Playing Azir now when he is leveled up does make him a bit more resilient, but yeah, maybe missing out a tiny bit before I could have played him and then attacked after the fact.
Yeah, because you have the lead and follow to protect Azir if there was like something going on. So you can squeeze one more attack here. Now that Pepskull is tapped out, you going to take advantage of the leveled up Azir and the double dais that's in play to boost up all of these blades and the sand soldiers now. And Pepsi takes the hit, recognizes, yeah, even if I heal with the fangs, it's not going to be enough. And both players played that very slow, but Aurelia Azir still has that explosive damage potential. The Azir was in hand. Hipster Waldo waiting for it to be leveled up to be played. Definitely a play style for the list we haven't seen typically. And, you know, maybe this might be the beginning of a paradigm shift for the deck where it wants to be less of a curve out stompy aggro, more saving its pieces, setting up for like combos of that nature. So Hipster Waldo able to very cleanly take game 2 thanks to the double dais Azir draw and some slower play respecting the thermogenic beam. And it's going to be now decided in game 3 if Pepsi is going to be able to close this out with Ruben Zoo. And then Hipster Waldo going to be playing Soraka Tahm Kench.
And of course, with this Conquest format, you win one deck, you cannot play that deck again. So Azir Aurelia and the Silver Rankin deck are both benched for this series. And going to this last and final game, the decisive game, of course, best of 3 for the entirety of this tournament. It will be, like you said, Tahm Soraka, which is a deck that we don't see very often, a deck that we used to see very, very often when it first came out. It was kind of one of the big archetypes with Targon. And then kind of maybe people got bored of it or just... It's always been, I think, okay, but like you said, very polarized matchups in some metas. It's just kind of unplayable if, you know, it doesn't hit the right matchups. But right away, Zoe to start things off, and Krusty Krogger with the Star Spring in hand. So I think both players can't really complain. Pretty good start for both.
And Pepsi we did see kept the Sunburst. This is just going to be held in the hand, probably to kill a Tahm Kench down the road. I don't know if Hipster Waldo is the type of player that relies very heavily on Tahm Kench. And is going to be like holding extra mana for Bastion, things like that. But it remains to be seen. Pepsi, if it does get very desperate, maybe Solari Priestess does get a Falling Comet to answer Star Spring, stop that win condition, and just try to win through long-term value.
And of course, in this color combo, Aftershock could have been a possibility, but not really considered, you know, the ideal mana-efficient response to landmarks right now. And I guess it's just the general thought that there aren't that many landmark decks that are really taking advantage of landmarks that have, you know, all this type of removal. So yeah, I think for now, Pepsi's going to have to definitely control the Star Spring, because it's something that if you can't interact with it, it becomes a problem. Because even if you're able to clear the board, that Star Spring is still there, and you're going to be more healing later on. If you can't end the game quick enough, which maybe Ruben Zoo is not a deck that can end games quickly, it kind of is more reactive, you're going to have problems.
Even cashing in a Thermogenic Beam to answer the Krusty Codger, keeping the damage unit off of the board to delay this Star Spring as long as possible. Pepsi-Cola's deck is built around just value generation and grinding your opponent down, and you have to you have to ensure the game is going to go as long as possible for a strategy like that to work. Zoe getting another rep on the Nexus here to discount the super cool star chart.
The Sunburst in hand could be very, very crucial at, you know, silencing any buffs on a certain unit for health and then killing it. Something like a Tahm Kench, for example, could be massive. So definitely, I like the one-of. I think Sunburst has always been a bit underrated as a card. Obviously, Targon had so many different options with invoke removal as well, and it wasn't really run very often. But I've seen it as a very nice card, kind of like a Vengeance. Most of the time when you're killing something with Vengeance, it doesn't have more than 6 health. And have that silence effect can do so much more in interacting with, you know, back in the day, Tryndamere, for example, before it could level up, and just a few other things with that kind of obliterate type effect.
And yeah, we've seen it every once in a while as a one-of, and I do like the inclusion here. And keeping it in the opening hand, Pepsi knows what he's after. The 6 HP also hits some of the, you know, really big targets that we've seen in the metagame that have been doing tons of work, things like Screeching Dragon. But Hipster Waldo just going to pass here. Star Spring's up to 2. Tahm Kench is ready to come down. Now that Hipster Waldo has a second one, might be willing to play out this first one. Pepsi-Cola already, again, has used a Thermogenic Beam. So this could make Hipster Waldo, you know, have a false sense of security here. Just once again attacking with this Zoe. Doesn't cash in the star chart first. Wants to get the discount here.
And we'll see how patiently both of the players want to play. Tahm Kench does now finally come down for Hipster Waldo. We'll see if Pepsi responds to that Sunburst in response. Still, of course, has the Daybreak effect, attacked, but hasn't played any cards yet. And there it is, a summon.
Yeah, that's why he didn't play the Star Chart, wanted to keep that open.
Yeah. And that's just, again, it's a reactive play. You want to make sure your opponent can just commit his mana to a certain big play like Tahm Kench, and now there's nothing else that Hipster Waldo can do. You're able to play Ballistic Bot, start ramping up your own game plan, start to get some chip damage in, some attack in as well, maybe a possible trader for that Star Shepherd. And yeah, try and control the board, because right now it's all about the Star Spring. There's no Soraka, there's no Tahm Kench on the board, and just the entirety of the value and the win condition here for Hipster Waldo is reliant on the Star Spring.
And the preemptive shakedown coming through. Gonna get a little another point of healing here from the Krusty Codger. Set up these 2 key targets to get traded into. And there's not a lot that Pepsi can do to respond. Gets the Get Excited, however, to save this. Bastion. Is it worth a Bastion? Is this worth?
Krusty Codger moving up in the world, stealing the Bastions from Tahm Kench. I never thought I'd live to see the day, but exciting time for this punching crab.
Now, again, with Sunburst down and with the Thermogenic Beam down, there is a really high chance, and now with all this mana being tapped out, Hipster Waldo can set up this Tahm Kench here. And Pepsi-Cola is definitely going to start suffering, because now the whole board is getting traded away. The generation there of the Pale Cascade just to buff up the Ballistic Bot to trade into the Shepherd. So this is going to delay the Star Spring by a lot. There's not going to be 2 damaged units in play, but now Tahm Kench is going to start controlling the board from Pepsi-Cola. Very difficult to develop anything that's going to be big enough to keep it from being devoured.
The Soraka draw there was so massive for Hipster Waldo. He was running out of fuel, only had 2 Hushes in hand, was going to rely on Tahm Kench to really provide value every turn. If it was removed at any point in time, he would be in trouble, but Soraka now can offer a lot of card draw every single turn, and that's definitely going to help, refuel the hand for Hipster Waldo and make sure he has enough interaction to keep Pepsi-Cola's win condition or plan at bay while his Star Spring slowly ramps up. It's still at 4, so still very far away, but once you populate this board a little bit more, you can defend it a bit more, you'll be able to, I think, get things going.
The Targon P&Z, very chip damage oriented deck. You're just going wide with all of the small units that you've been generating over the course of the game, and Soraka Tahm Kench loves it when you do that. They're just going to keep on blocking, and at this point, Pepsi-Cola is looking for the Submersibles to start coming down. He needs to start looking for those Star Shapings to get those really big, elusive win conditions that Soraka Tahm Kench struggles to deal with. There is Double Hush in hand, but Spell Shield on something like a Great Beyond could be very clutch, or if the Submersibles come down once again to maybe tank a couple of those, clear a path for the Star Shaping win condition, it could happen. And Hipster Waldo is just going to be enjoying a feast here on the board thanks to Tahm Kench and Soraka.
There's the attack coming in. Obviously, you don't want to block here. It would help the Star Spring get its value, but you also, at some point, can't go down to 0 on your Nexus HP, so down to 8 already. That is fine, of course. There aren't going to be any huge blockers. Star Shepherd, which is kind of maybe the riskier unit, if with a shakedown or something, it's able to hit Nexus, but with it being dead, you're not too scared about dying to Nexus damage. But, at some point, you have to be a bit careful. And there's the Tahm Kench's first meal comes in. The Ballistic Bot has been killed. Ignitions, the discard value there as well. But Submersible comes in, 5 attack and elusive, cannot be blocked. Might be a way for Pepsi to apply some pressure and try and maybe not end things right now, but at least start mounting up some Nexus damage.
And Tahm Kench number 3 being drawn by Hipster Waldo. And now the elusives are coming through. If Hipster Waldo didn't have these Hushes in hand, this would be a much different story. But right now, he's not feeling a lot of pressure. You attack with the Submersible, it gets silenced. You get to block it, and it's just more damage going on to your units. There is the threat, and we've seen it before, of something like a Tahm Kench getting whittled down to 1 or 2 HP and getting healed all the way back up.
Triple Vi versus triple Tahm Kench. Interesting full champion hands for both players there. Obviously, Vi not going to be super useful at this point in the game. Like you mentioned, the double hush actually, and such a reactive play state now from Waldo. Once he has the board set up, he has his champion on the board, his Star Spring. He knows the Star Spring can't be removed. It's going to be just all about reaction, all about you making sure that Pepsi can't come back into this game or mess with his own game plan here. And having double hush makes it that much easier.
And Peps knows here, right? The Devour coming through on the Vi. You've got Vault Breaker to try to pressure here. And this is just going to force Hipster Waldo to throw another card on the stack at the very least.
The Hush comes in, takes off the attack, and also removes the, if you were to play more cards, extra attack from coming in, because obviously now Vi has no word. She's a vanilla 2/4 at that point, and she will be eaten by Tom Kench in the process.
So that's Hush number 1 down. Peps Cola has done a great job, I think, so far of just overcoming all of these obstacles, like with the first Tom Kench being answered, 1 Hush out of the way. Hipster Waldo has 3, so I think you're counting on perhaps at least 2 of them being drawn here, and trying to protect Vi. This is gonna be pretty close, because this is the point, like you were talking about, Panda, where you need to start blocking, and Waldo actually going to cash in the Tom Kench now that there's no danger. Going for the Bayou Brunch to level up the Tom Kench here.
Not something we see very often, but definitely going to help out here, especially when you know your opponent's fairly tapped out with 2 mana. You know what's possible in their hand, Mystic Shot, etc. Not really enough to really deal with this Tom Kench. And, it's big body. So, yeah, right away, capitalizing on that, not mistake, obviously, but that vulnerability from Pepsi where he didn't have really a chance to respond. And continue taking control of the game, continue using that Tom Kench signature spell every single turn to get value and to get, obliterate or consume units, however you'd like to call it, while still having this Hush and this, again, you're getting now closer to Star Spring with Tom Kench's health because it's so big every time it takes damage and every time it eats things, you're able to really manipulate that and get a lot more heals than before.
And then you can just very safely eat, the largest target on your opponent's side of the board. You want Tom Kench to take a ton of damage. You've got doubled Astral Protection to back up this play. So things just really went in Hipster Waldo's favor. Peps Cola playing this deck. I think Soraka Tom Kench is just the meta outlier you're just never going to account for, right? When you go down the list of meta decks, Soraka Tom Kench, is outside of everyone's memory, I think, for the most part. Hipster Waldo has a little bit of an edge, ironically. Hasn't, been grinding the game very seriously lately, so doesn't really have, a taste of the current meta, and is just going based on his own comfort picks, what he won the previous seasonal with, and is just going just purely based off that.
Yeah, it doesn't quite have an acquired taste for this meta just yet. Tom Kench player. But he does have an acquired taste for winning games and winning tournaments, and I think it might be happening here once again. And bringing a pick that people, again, aren't playing very often, kind of like Nightfall, a deck that can do very well, but because of the play style, maybe because people got tired of playing it after its initial release, it's kind of been swept aside, even though it's proven to be very good in tournaments and on ladder before. But Hipster Waldo, someone that, doesn't give up. Definitely enjoyed this lineup going to last seasonal. Teched around it, and I think really had a lot of success alongside some other players that were doing the same thing and bringing it here as well.
Making a choice here between Astral Protection and the Hush. I mean, you don't want to use the second Astral Protection. Very stubborn here. But Hush is your out against a Star Shaping or just that big elusive. I think you have to go for Protection here if you want to keep the Soraka alive.
And you're happy taking this massive hit because now you have Soraka's Wish to just win the game next turn, possibly, and then see what response there is with still having Guiding Touch and the Hush as a secondary response to whatever Pepsi does in response to that. Soraka's Wish just to end the game again because there's no removal for Star Spring. It's definitive if it goes through.
All right, taking one more shot here. Peps Cola sensing the hesitation there. Perhaps you don't have the means to protect the Soraka, but has the Guiding Touch. Now that she has this massive HP pool, thanks to the Astral Protection, you can just heal her back up for her to survive. And there's not 2 burst speed cards or fast speed cards in the hand.
Star Shaping, though.
For Vi to get boosted up.
Star shaping, you have 12 mana to work with your Pepsi.
I don't think it's going to be enough, though.
Especially not now with only 7 mana available. Regardless of what you get here, it'll count up, and the Star Spring will end the game at this point.
Was that the play, to just preemptively Star Spring? I think, well, the issue is that if you do that, then Tahm Kench eats Vi, and then you lose out on a lot of attack power anyway.
But I think you're definitely more on the defensive here if you're Pepsi. I mean, the key thing here is a Star Spring that's going to end the game, basically, I think.
Yeah, and now the one of Star Shaping coming from Hipster Waldo's deck. Yep. Able to take game 3. Star Shaping a card that, you know, comes in clutch in situations like that. Not just rehealing your own Nexus and more aggressive decks, but when you have a unit with large HP pool, the 5 healing goes on a unit, generating an extra win condition. And Hipster Waldo able to take the set in game 3 versus Pepsi-Cola, off to a great start with a little bit of old and a little bit of new meeting together for his lineup here.
That being said, we mentioned the Tahm Soraka having maybe polarized matchups and some matchups doing very well, and it almost feels like the opponent can't do anything about, you know, your win condition with Tahm Kench, able to protect it very easily and efficiently with Bastion and Astral Protection, and the Star Spring as well, of course. But against other matchups, you know, in the past, Fearsome was always a big problem. Certain aggro decks were certain a big problem, even with Guiding Touch and Broad Eye Protector. Some aggro decks flood the board very quickly, and you weren't able to do anything, especially the ones with the Fearsome tag. So we'll see what he runs into in the rest of this tournament and how those matchups might, you know, affect this deck where you don't have bans, you don't have a chance to not play a certain deck. You have to go in with both your decks and win with both. And with Tahm Kench Soraka, that might be a problem against certain matchups. But we will find out more about that, you know, upcoming semifinals after this very short 5-minute break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fight Night Legends EU Seasonal Smackdown. We had a very fast round one conclusion, and we are already trucking right along to round two. We've got Raxitos and Den coming through. Den, of course, was the EU seasonal champion from the season one here. And has been representing France, has been playing beautifully, since getting that, that really big win under his belt, has been showing up in Fight Night a lot of times after that. And yeah, just a really solid player and just likes to play good meta clean play. What can I say?
And Raxitos, of course, one of the best Spanish players on the scene right now, was top 4 in the last seasonal, and now has become really an expert with deep alongside players like Extasio, for example, and kind of this whole Spanish revolution with Nautilus being dropped with more of a turbo deep variant that now has spilled over and seen a lot of success in many different tournaments in the meta right now. Obviously on ladder against the Aurelia, it has some problems, obviously. But in a tournament where you have the chance to ban a certain lineup or prepare for, a certain range of decks, it is very potent. It has a lot of great matchups and yeah, still has some problems with, drawing the cards in the wrong order, not able to go deep quick enough, finding yourself in the mid game a bit vulnerable to certain kind of pretty fast strategies. But overall, I think, at least for me, one of my favorite decks, and yeah, a very different version of what it was before. No control tools, no Withering Whale, no Grasp, for example, and focusing much more on the sea monsters with Lure of the Depths. The Sea Scarab obviously was a huge addition to the archetype, and the revert to the Direct Edger's nerf was also pretty massive.
And this version as well has a couple copies of Thorny Toad. Gives you a little extra chump blocking in the early game, of course, to shore up your lack of control tools. A couple Bone Skewers in there, and Fading Memories, allowing for some double dipping on a few of these toss mechanics. And just getting some extra copies of things like Jaw Hunters and Deadbloom Wanderer can just really close out games. The natural tech we've seen in the modern era is the Shipwreck Hoarder at the top end. Just some great value in very, very long matchups, and gives you a way to shuffle in a couple more cards if you happen to go up against TLC. The theme that we've seen for today's broadcast so far has definitely been players keeping their eye on TLC. As Aurelia has been trending downward in terms of win rate and probably how much it's being brought to tournaments. And people, I think, are just waiting for players to get comfortable bringing TLC once again.
Scarzig, now that you mention it, there's not a single TLC in the tournament today, and that is a first. That is a first for a long time. I can guarantee you at least one person every single tournament decides to bring TLC for whatever reason. Obviously, I don't like to see it, but it is going to be, always going to be a meta deck. But this is the first tournament, I think, since really you'd have to go back, maybe even before Lysandre came out. There was still obviously the control versions with Ledros, etc., that were still coming up in Fight Nights. It might be, many months of always having at least one version of like Shadow Isles failure to control, but we're not seeing it today. So I guess some celebration is in order. Thank you, players, for that very kind gesture.
They know what's up. They know what's up. And the meta, it's interesting. Like when you discount like just one or two decks and take them away from the equation, the meta can coalesce and form around an entirely new setup. And even for this tournament, Den is the only player that brought Nasus Thresh. We're seeing like a really interesting showcase of these less played lists, that things that have maybe more specific matchups. And I think that this is a great time for, again, players to practice their seasonal lineups, right? Maybe expecting other players to bring something that's a bit more meta to see how the counters that you want to play, that what you're practiced on, might work out here. Things like deep into TLC, Raxitos maybe looking to get some early farms in on that, maybe trying to get a little bit more experience in that matchup, because, when you consider the ladder, TLC, despite being a very potent deck, still has a huge weakness to Aurelia Azir even after the nerfs, and so you aren't going to be getting that practice that you would normally enjoy potentially by playing a counter TLC deck on the ladder. It's of course if you aren't going specifically for Aurelia Azir in your lineup. So seasonals, it's going to be pretty interesting. It's shaping up to have a lot more variety, I think, than players were anticipating. And so getting into game one, we've got Turbo Thralls into Discard Aggro.
I think the biggest thing about the seasonal is the fact that I think all three of the top meta decks, Azir, Aurelia, TLC, and Nasus, are all targetable, and there are lineups that can be a problem for each one of those different decks if you build your lineup around that one. So they are vulnerable, and the mining games definitely step in. But to start things off right away, discard aggro doing discard aggro things. 3 damage on turn 1. We see a lot of great cards in hand, but maybe missing a few of the the glue for this deck to really mesh in the early rounds. Not that many units to spam the board. You're gonna have Draven on turn 3, yes, but what else do you have?
You can try your best to focus on just beating your opponent down. But if you don't get a strong enough high roll and you give Raxitos enough time to get these thralls set up, there's no way for discard aggro to stop them, right? Just even a little bit of damage, like 6 or 10 damage, is fine. If Blighted Ravine comes down, or the Kindly Tavern Keepers come out later to offset this damage, then Raxitos is going to be feeling perfectly fine. You have Lissandra on 3 now with the Curator and Double Time in a Bottle. Just evaluating the hand state here, it looks pretty favored for Thralls at the moment. I've seen this matchup a lot, and discard aggro, it's a pretty classic, aggro has a short window to snowball and push through that damage before it's too late.
That being said, Lissandra cannot block here with the Axe threatening an attack boost on either the rear guard or the Draven, and making that toughness kind of irrelevant for Lissandra with 4 attack coming in while it defends. So going to be a problem there. Doesn't have really board clears either. Doesn't have the the avalanches, the ice shards right now. And out of all aggro decks that we've seen, discard aggro I think is the deck that can really get cleared out, but then still have a way to come back into the game and create pressure on the mid to late game, and even just the entire late game at the end.
With Jinx and the Augmented Experimenter, it is going to have a lot of refuel here from Den. The one of survival skills making a guest appearance means that Den can play this Jinx, I think, pretty safely. Raxitos doesn't have that board clear, that reactivity, as you mentioned, and so is forced, I think, for the to make this Thrall count. You can go for Promising Future here, because even if you go for Curator, Double Time in a Bottle, the Thrall's not going to hatch till next round anyway. And so if you go for Promising Future here, then you can crack it open next round. It's a heavy commitment for sure, because you're letting Den develop 1 more, or maybe even 2 more units, and it's you can see the hesitation here, right? Raxitos is anticipating the worst punish and just goes for the Curator this round, just to see what Den does.
And there's a Promising Future coming in as well. We could see that last Frozen Thrall plate as well, just to have the even timers, but maybe you think you need that mana next turn for Lissandra plus the Double Time in a Bottle. Yeah, does come down
and
as
just
well.
Gets it down.
The good thing for Raxitos is that Den's hand right now is a bit awkward. You can play, obviously, the Experimenter this turn. It obviously reduces your just general power by quite a lot. You did get a good draw there with a Flame Chomper.
Develops. Yeah, so Den, not really a sizable board here with Jinx and Draven in play. Still a very wide hand, not able to empty it to flip the Jinx. By developing the rear guard, gives Raxitos the time to get this Double Time in a Bottle cast, and now there is 2 8/8s showing up on the scene to defend the Nexus here. Raxitos looks to be in the clear. Den needs to change course and go for a Death Rocket strategy, perhaps, to close this one out.
Yeah, and you can't really attack now. With the quick attack units, with the importance of the Jinx, maybe you can attack with everything but Jinx, possibly. Just give up the Draven, you have a second one in hand. You get the Flame Chomper out with the Axe to drag one of the 8/8s at least, and then try and push some damage in that way, but it's still not really ideal.
With the Whirling Death, you can maybe attack with the Jinx, get one of these Thralls to go down. Raxitos might anticipate that, of course, go for the Curator, and then using his signature inclusion here, the survival skills. When you hard cast it like that, it doesn't just affect one unit, it affects your entire board. So everything here will still be able to swing through and survive with 1 HP.
And for those viewers in chat that might question, as is the case with every single Fight Night tournament we do that Den is playing in, Den is not currently on the webcam that is a French caster that's, getting Den, spectating him and able to create the stream and, the viewing experience for the French audience as well. And we're going off of that stream feed as well. But Den is not on screen. That is another very nice and very talented French caster that's, doing this stuff over on his channel for the French community.
And now with everything being set down to 1 HP, Lissandra is in hand. She will be leveled thanks to these 2 thralls coming out. 0 mana ice shards and a tough nexus are also in the future here for Den. And this looks like a wipe. The Preservarium draws the Blighted Ravine to offset this damage, wipe this board, and set up for these thralls to deal 16 to the nexus.
The Experimenter coming in, not quite enough damage to do it. We'll see what the draws are here from Den. The level up does come in, of course, but is it too little too late?
You level up the Jinx, you draw 3 cards. There's potential for you to get another one. But this does set the Thrall down, so it will also die to the Blighted Ravine. Raxitos going to cash this in. And when you're potentially getting threatened with so much overwhelm damage, you have to try to offset as much as possible here. So Den just going to cash in the Draven, going to chump block the 2/2 with the 1/1, keep the Augmented Experimenter alive through the Blighted Ravine as a 3/1.
And we'll see what
with the board being wiped, the crowd favorite is going to be a pretty lackluster play from this position. Den is really hoping for a second Jinx draw here.
The Rummage is not bad. The Rummage can let you try and find a little bit more. You have a lot of mana to work with. You have double Jury Rig to get that, some pretty good value from those discards as well. And then suddenly the crowd favorite becomes a bit more of an option with a bit more of, with 2 more 1-drops. Still, you have enough mana to do it also. And the vision as well. Suddenly this board is looking pretty scary. The Ice Shard will be a problem in stopping pretty much everything but the crowd favorite.
And we'll see if Den does adapt to this, right? There was the development that allowed those 2 thralls to come out and stop the entire attack, but Den just says, I need to take that risk. I need to just keep developing here before I set up for the crowd favorite. Pushing his luck. Raxitos passes, keeps the Ice Shard open, wants to use it to punish the attack, doesn't anticipate needing to stop a crowd favorite. And so with the board being wiped, we do have to maybe block this Legion Rearguard, which will survive here.
Looks like Den might be opting to block with Lissandra instead to have maybe a win condition next turn to end the game quickly with that Thrall. But I think gonna opt to just sacrifice the Thrall instead, keep the Lissandra alive. You could use the Axe on the Rearguard, of course, but you would be discarding the Experimenter, so maybe not the best idea, even though it would kill Lissandra and deal with the Nexus's toughness. 6 HP now for Raxitos, still with the Nexus tough, means that might be, a little bit more. Not really going to be a problem with Get Excited, for example. You're not scared of being killed by Burn. But Jinx being drawn here, is it too little too late, though? Is it? Yeah, I think there might just not be enough time for Den to really do something.
Unfortunately too late. With the tough Nexus still part of the equation, I think you need like 2 more rounds to cast the Rocket. With the Clock Hand coming through, that's going to be another 8/8 attacking alongside. And yeah, really volatile game 1. Despite everything, Den did bring that very close. If that second Lissandra hadn't come through to give the Nexus tough, there could have been enough damage snuck through there. Den did play to his outs, pushing his luck to set up that big crowd favorite. And unfortunately, the Thralls were able to come up on top that time. If you play that matchup over and over and over again, I think it ends up being pretty even for sure. We talked about it. Den drew a pretty slow hand considering everything, especially when you think about what discard aggro can do to you sometimes. Like this hand.
Exactly, that's the biggest thing. We were seeing turn 3 attack with just Draven and a Rearguard, and that's it. And usually you see, a 5 or 6 unit board already at that point in the game. So that was the biggest, I think, problem. I mean, we saw Raxitos surviving on 6 HP. If there would have been a bigger tempo push early on, that might have been 0 by the time you got to that point in the game. We'll see what Deep can do against discard aggro here. Obviously, we're missing control tools like Withering Whale and maybe Grasp for Jinx and Draven, so things are very different in this matchup than they were before. But we do at least have a Deadloom Wanderer in hand to have some lifesteal pretty early on.
Yeah, Deadloom Wanderer in hand, maybe Lower the Depths. This one does run double Beast below, so you do have a decent blocker in the mid game. Top deck, like a Bone Skewer, could be huge for this Deadloom Wanderer, and that will just allow you to facilitate like the turbo deep that this list really wants to focus on.
And this is what we were talking about. This is the scary stuff. Look, this is turn 2. Look at what the board we're looking at from Den's side. This is why discard aggro is considered, a very high roll deck. When you find the right cards in the right order, suddenly even a turn 2 attack is you're already at 10 HP if you're Raxitos. What do you do about this?
Yeah, and this is what discard aggro wants to do. This is the high roll that it's known for. We're finally seeing it here. Raxitos only has one potential blocker to develop here. And the only way out, I think, from this position with rear guard, rummage into vision potentially coming down next round is probably Bone Skewer, but just going to take the opportunity to attack here. Wants to get the healing now, wants to force Den to block, to power down a potential crowd favorite to top on this curve Sunday that Den's got going.
Crowd favor or even a Flame Chomper, being able to drag that lifesteal out of the way and maybe pushing that remaining 10 damage without being able to heal would have been a problem for Raxitos. So just trying to get the lifesteal while he can. Double Toad can come down, well, at least only one for now. If the attack comes in right after, it will be a problem. And yeah, this is a problem. Double Vision, Draven doing its thing, gonna have more axes and just a full attack here with beefy units. Gonna be probably looking like a surrender. We'll see what the math checks out there for Raxitos. But even if he would have survived, I think it's pretty doomed. You only have so much lifesteal with deep, and that's discard aggro. Kind of that's the goal when you think about playing discard aggro. That's the the fantasy land you live in. You want to be able to end games on turn 4 and go next, and it definitely worked out there for Den. Ties the series 1-1. Raxitos has to win on deep. In EU Masters, we've seen this be a bad position to be in. One of the more overrated decks in terms of play rate, amount of times it was brought, and its actual win rate in the tournament. But we'll see if Raxitos can kind of bypass that and get a good showing for this game 3.
This third match is going to be very interesting, where Nasus Thresh also has the potential to be very aggressive with the right cards in the opening hand, but is also known for being can get pretty bricky, can get pretty slow, and so deep could pop off here. Vile Feast helps a little in the situation, but Den has the curve. Bakai Reaper into Cursed Keeper into Blighted Caretaker, the forbidden opening that was nerfed, still rearing its ugly head here.
The curve is there. The attack token is also there, attacking on 3 while you're able to get the Caretaker off. So everything perfect there for Den. And the fact that there's no Withering Whale, no very cheap, clean answer to the Blighted Caretaker anymore in this list. There's a Vile Feast, of course, but that's really not going to do all that much in stopping, again, 13 damage that's going to come in on turn 3.
Now, Vile Feast, I love this read. Popping open the Cursed Keeper now. You need to get a blocker in play. By popping this open, you're making it so Blighted Caretaker or Ravenous Butcher or Glimpse Beyond is going to be a really awkward play for Den now. You can play Bakai Reaper and just swing in, but this definitely stops like that devastating attack that Den was working on and buys Raxitos, looking at the hand here, a lot of time.
Yeah, very heads up play. I think this is always the case. Even before, when Cursed Keeper was played, you always thought, should I just kill it myself because he's going to be able to use this, the deck is made in a way that's going to be able to synergize with it and get the bonus from killing it yourself. And there's always that thought in the back of your head, I think. Now, though, with how efficient Slays are and how efficient it is to self-sacrifice and how easily, the deck synergizes together, I think even more the case that you should be the one popping if you have a chance and playing proactively and denying, like you said, the Caretaker combo this turn.
And by being able to develop the Jaw Hunter here, another interesting decision being presented to Raxitos to get rid of the Bakai Reaper, play more defensively, or just get rid of the 4/3 and then take the damage and hope that you draw something that can block Fearsome. And I'm not sure which line I would take.
It's tough, especially looking at the hand, because you don't really know what you're going to be doing the next turn. You might have to wait on
Yeah.
the Stalking Shadows, for example, so you don't have that clear path already of, oh, my next 2 turns or 3 turns will look like this, and I have to do this now, and then I'll be able to kill. If I block with the 1/1 spider, I can kill this later with this. It's a bit trickier now. You have the Stalking Shadows and find out which way the game tells you to go, and I guess T-Scarab will be the way there. You have the Lure of the Depths, but I don't think you can play it this turn. You'll only get the 1-mana discount on each of the Sea Scarabs, so you wouldn't be able to play them out right now. And you do need blockers, obviously. I mean, this board is looking kind of scary. Maybe with Vile Feast, you're able to play it slow and go for higher value.
Yeah, if you go for Vile Feast here on the 3/1, the Glimpse does come through, but maybe you're hoping, right? You kind of played around the Blighted Caretaker, which I believe Den is only running as a 1 of, yes, and maybe you're just anticipating that you'll have a chance to play one more blocker if Blighted Caretaker does come through. But this is getting pretty dicey. The Bakai's going to keep scaling up. Black Spear. Oh no. Such a powerful tempo opener. Raxitos made a fantastic early play with that Vile Feast to stop the most devastating turn 3 attack. But here we are in turn 5. And, you know, the attack token is here once again. And Blighted Caretaker, I mean, you just hit your 3/1 and just go in, right? Because the 2 saplings cover your whatever Raxitos might develop. There is no, like you mentioned, no Withering Whale, no copies of the box, anything like that. You'd have to worry about punishing this play.
There's a Sea Scarab coming down without the Lure of the Depth. I think you just can't afford the tempo loss of playing Lure. If you're able to play Lure, Sea Scarab for 1 and then the Vile Feast, then you don't have Bone Skewer, for example, which might be necessary to just stop a lot of damage coming in this turn. Biggest thing here will be, of course, that Sea Scarab cannot block the Bakai Reaper, but with Bone Skewer, you're able to hit it. You're able to get the Sea Scarab back on top of your deck because it is ephemeral, and then you'll just be able to play it next turn, and you might obviously mitigate a lot of the damage coming in here.
So just barely hanging on, going all the way down to 7 HP. Raxitos also has the Vile Feast, doesn't want to go for that. Maybe goes for Stalking Shadows. Now with the Sea Scarab at the top of the deck, you can just get even more copies of that. With everything said and done here, Den doesn't even go for the Glimpse.
There's the damage coming in.
The Sea Scarab would still go back on top of the deck, though.
The Dead Bloom is found. The biggest thing now is at 7 HP with Nasus. I mean, it's already going to be at 7, so it's a problem, obviously. You have the Glimpse on now after the fact when there's no mana, no response there for the 2/1 Ephemeral that did not strike because of the Bone Skewer. And if you find a Nasus, it might be over. If you find, obviously, the Nasus Atrocity combo is what I mean. There might be some counterplay still available with Devourer of the Depths, but it's still going to get away from Raxitos when it continues to grow more and more.
Oh, I didn't realize that the Ephemeral Sea Scarab wasn't actually going to go back on top of the deck after it strikes with Bone Skewer, because Ephemeral Flight does go back on top of the deck. Maybe it's just because the strike goes with the spell, and it's like not tied to the unit itself. Or is it strike versus Nexus strike? I don't know, but very weird interaction.
The Dead Bloom here can definitely help. Lifesteal, obviously, try and get some. That being said, with the Merciless Hunter, the vulnerable and now no Bone Skewer in hand for interaction might become a problem. You might have to, I mean, especially once you see it played, then you attack for sure this turn to get the value from it.
Yeah, you have second Dead Bloom Wanderer. Maybe you force Den to overreact. Especially with the Glimpse Beyond being used, there's always the chance now that with another Glimpse or even Vile Feasting your own unit like the Blighted Caretaker to move it out of the way and sidestep that lifesteal, it's a little bit less guaranteed to get that healing.
Yeah, just considering the second Dead Bloom Wanderer is ephemeral, obviously going to attack this turn, just get the lifesteal from it, go back up to 10. The Lure of the Depths hasn't been played this game because you just haven't had the space to do it. Just too much pressure from Den, and you didn't have enough of a Sea Scarab payoff, or at least the mana advantage in spell mana earlier on to play it. So I think that won't even be played the rest of this game. I think you just have to go for trying to stabilize with Devour next turn possibly, and try and get the value from the lifesteal on these Deadbloom Wanderers right now.
Yeah, just so much early pressure, not even like worrying about Nasus or Thresh, just like the onslaught of these 3 attack and 4 attack units that Raxitos just wasn't able to develop against. Even with the Sea Scarabs for a little bit of defense, Deadbloom Wanderers here coming through for healing. There's just so much like being pressured after the fact. And it's the similar situation to discard aggro versus thralls that we saw, where you have to take priority to try to force your opponent to trade away some of their board, and you're worried about what they might develop afterward.
And we will see a Merciless Hunter that won't be hitting anything if the 2 blocks are obviously forced here. Biodox is attacking with both. The Ravenous Butcher can hit the 1/1, and it's going to still be a board full of attackers. Yeah, I guess, yeah, you just don't even block into the 3/2 Ephemeral. And there's still a massive board with enough damage to really take it here. I think even with Vile Feast, the open attack might do it. We're going to see 15 damage being threatened. Vile Feast gets you to 14. You have no units to interact with in terms of Bone Skewer top decks. And that might just be it. Not enough. Too much tempo coming from Thresh Nasus. -2 on the Nexus. And Raxitos should accept defeat here.
Yeah. Maybe just taking the time to analyze the plays, maybe if there was any different lines that could have been taken, any other decisions that could have been made, just to prepare going into the next set. But the Nasus Thresh curve was completely monstrous from Den. The key play, though, for sure, big shout out to Raxitos for recognizing the Vile Feast early to stop the Blighted Caretaker from coming through, because if that had ever hit on round 3, I think you're just so far behind from that position that you wouldn't be able to come back at all. Whereas Raxitos, I think, did create an opportunity for the deck to come through for him.
And it does feel bad because these 2 losses are against decks that we know very well have the potential to really just have a hand that you won't be able to answer. And I think both times with Discard Aggro and Thresh Nasus, the opening hand and the opening tempo from both decks from Den was just unstoppable regardless of how you're playing, regardless of what you're playing. So yeah, very unfortunate for Raxitos. I think he did play well, like you said, that, Vile Feast early on, that read on, making sure that your opponent's probably going to getting value from popping his own Curse Keeper. You pop it yourself proactively. I think it was a great play. But even with that great play, even with many other great plays, it would not have been enough, I think, to stop the tempo.
Almost the amount of decks that lose to a Nasus Thresh curve like that, includes a lot of lists for sure. Not very many things can stand up to that sort of attack power that early in the game. But suffice to say, really great set getting into game 3. The Thralls really popped off, trying to survive, getting those key wins. And yeah, we're going to get a look here at a game between Gamebreaker and Hipster Waldo. Both players now just fighting it out here in the bracket, trying to figure out who's going to stay in winners.
We saw, of course, the first semifinal that was then advanced to the winners final. Raxitos knocked down to losers bracket, and this is the second semifinal happening alongside it. Because the pace was very quick in that first best of 3, we have chance here to hop into this one. Check out what the actual score is right now. I think it definitely isn't on game 1. I think that would be a bit slow considering that we are seeing a Zeralia here. That would not make much sense in my eye. But definitely going to be, I think, going to game. This might be game 2 or 3, and it might be the deciding game for this series.
The matchup between Thralls and Azir Aurelia, the players who have been experimenting with Thralls, has been running it in tournaments and stuff, recognize that the deck is generally unfavored, but if you get your early Lissandra, you get your Ice Shards and whatnot, it can't be too bad. But Hipster Waldo was able to close it out there. We saw had the Deus in play and just popped off.
That was game 2.
You just can't keep up.
And now they are tied 1-1 in this series. Gamebreaker did win game 1, and now we're going to see Hipster Waldo once again going to game 3 with his Tompkins Soraka, having to get a win on it. I think similar to what we saw in the quarterfinals, he got a very quick win. Game 2 with Zeralia, and now moving to game 3 where Hipster Waldo is on Tompkins Soraka and Gamebreaker is on the Thralls deck list, which I haven't really seen this matchup played. I think 2 very unusual decks. The Thralls obviously now not so unusual in the past week or 2, but definitely not a matchup you see every day.
When I've never seen this matchup played out yet. When you evaluate just the way the 2 decks operate, I think that Gamebreaker probably would be favored. Just getting like massive 8/8s with Overwhelm swinging through. The high attack power, right? You need to have very specifically Soraka or Tahm Kench in play by the time that happens, and then you need to have like what? Astral Protection to even have the HP pull to properly block a Thrall. Getting your units damaged and not dying is going to be pretty easy to achieve in this matchup. If you're basically Gamebreaker can't play as Ice Shards or Avalanches or Blighted Ravine, and it's all in on the Thrall game plan.
And there's a bit of an awkward start here for Hipster Waldo. Does not have the Star Spring to start things off. Has the Soraka, has the, kind of the backup with a Bastion there, with the Guiding Touch, the Pale Cascade, but is missing the key piece, which is that Star Spring landmark. Especially when there is no landmark, response in this Thrall's deck from Gamebreaker. It's very important to get it down early and start, ramping up those counters as soon as possible.
Preservarium being played, just getting it down early when there's not a lot of pressure on the board just yet. Getting that card draw, looking for your combo pieces is great. Ice Shard, not a great pickup, unfortunately. We've got Kindly Tavern Keepers to stabilize if anything very aggressive happens. An early Lissandra could come down. Gamebreaker is going to take this very conservatively. Wants to keep board space open so that this Taliyah can duplicate this Frozen Thrall, it looks like.
The Tavern Keeper not going to be a very relevant piece in this game, simply because you're not really worried about your Nexus health when you're playing against Tahm Kench Soraka. It's not usually the case, especially not once you get these, enormous 8/8s on the board. It's not going to be a big deal. The Hush there as a kind of a interactive spell, the double Hush actually, to stop overwhelm damage could be pretty huge going forward.
Even if your units are still going to be sacrificed to the 8 damage, not taking the overwhelm is going to be pretty big for buying yourself an extra couple rounds. And sometimes that's all Soraka Tahm Kench needs, right? We've got a wide board of damaged units here. If a Star Spring comes through, it will be enormous. We've got Guiding Touch here now to save the Boxtopus from what looks like an Ice Shard being hovered. Gamebreaker just taking advantage of the opportunity now that there is no Star Spring in play.
This would actually be a great hit on the Boxtopus, giving it 4 attack, allowing it to kill Taliyah as well, because the Taliyah will be going down to 4 from the Ice Shard, self-inflicting damage there. So pretty good read there. You're able to heal up the Boxtopus as well with the Soraka. Soraka attacking with 4 HP isn't going to be a problem. There's nothing that can kill her just yet. But like I said, not having Star Spring down on the board means that all this, work you're doing is not really getting you that passive value towards your win condition. You're just kind of stalling here, but not really advancing towards your win condition, which is definitely a problem.
Yeah, so really great line here with the Pale Cascade. Gamebreaker's version is actually running triple Taliyah. We've seen the debate raging here with Thralls being such a new deck in the metagame. A lot of players experimenting with it, trying to figure out what the right mixture is, whether or not Taliyah belongs, or if she's just a one-of to duplicate a Thrall and that's her only purpose. But Gamebreaker going all in with 3 Taliyah, wants to take advantage of her attack power alongside the Thralls apparently. And now with Frostguard coming into play, no way to answer. Those 8/8s finally will come through. Hipster Waldo, meanwhile, digging deep in the deck, still looking for the first Star Spring here in round 7 going into it.
And he cannot find it. This is something that, when you find the Star Spring early on, when you find the Soraka and Tahm Kench, the deck flows freely and it seems very good. But when you're missing those few key cards, kind of like with Scargrounds as well, in that deck with Braum and Vlad, suddenly your deck kind of crumbles and nothing makes sense, which is definitely a problem when you're trying to win a Game 3 in a semifinals in a Fight Night tournament. And it might be the case here for Hipster Waldo, not finding Star Spring. You're not going to push damage going to the Nexus against the board you're currently looking at. You have to maybe even have a hard time defending next turn. How long can you defend for, really, against these Thralls?
Yeah, everything that you defend with is going to have low HP. You wanted to take chip damage, just chump a little bit in the early mid game as you get the Star Spring. If there was a Star Spring in play on turn 2, it'd probably be very close to about halfway leveled thanks to that exchange with the Soraka and the Boxtopus and everything that's been going on so far. But right now, it's just about survival. And with 2 Thralls hatched, 1 in play, potential to summon another one off of Lissandra, We could even see the Watcher come through to close this out.
Tahm Kench is found there for Hipster Waldo. An important card, of course, but definitely not a Star Spring, which is what I think Hipster Waldo has wanted for so many top decks in a row.
This is rare, I think, that, you know, with 3 Star Springs, drawing cards off Soraka with the Guiding Touch, to not get at least one this late into the game, it's, you know, it's the curse. When you have a deck that's built around a very specific card being in play, all of the classic landmark decks felt that way. You know, old Grand Plaza, Scar Grounds lists, when you don't get that set up, the list is just really fighting to find a win condition. Even Tahm Kench showing up very late, where everything that he could devour starts to get a little bit too big for him to handle.
Bastion being played proactively here, possibly just to get this, you know, mana used efficiently in light of what he might need to use next turn to defend with hushes, etc.
Yeah, we've got the 0 mana Ice Shards being created from Lissandra these days, and without a Star Spring in play, you know, it's perfectly acceptable now to throw the Ice Shards out. Because you're still getting Nexus damage, you're still chipping away at the defenders to get more overwhelms through.
And triple hush there for Hipster Waldo. Able to stop some of the overwhelm damage if he wants to, but, you know, it's still 8 damage going through. You're still going to lose those trades. Maybe not the most effective way to do things. That being said, what are you really using your mana on this turn? You can't really continue developing. There's not really even space on the board.
It's not even Astral Protection. Yeah, not even Astral Protection in order to buff up the Tahm Kench to get him to be able to block the Thrall. You can take this hit and I guess just star shaping your Nexus after this. Try to go underneath.
There's a Consume coming in on the Draklor and trying to clear that board a little bit, giving really just space for Gamebreaker to continue developing stuff with the mana he has, because, I mean, he might have had a board space issue even. So this is not really the end of the world here for Gamebreaker.
Yeah, you even got the second Draklorn in hand, so you can still pop open the Frozen Thrall if you want. But Gamebreaker just going to interrupt this play entirely. Puts Ice Shard out on the stack like this, so it pops the Spell Shield. Entomb's going to come through so that the Tahm Kench does not get to eat, and it'll just be -1 attacker and blocker here.
And the Ice Shard is, of course, threatening to kill the Boxtopus as well, at 1 HP right now. The Great Beyond is a possibility. Scourge as well, but again, I mean, I'm not entirely sure you're able to win it off of that. Especially not against a deck like Thralls that has answered with 3 Sisters, for example.
And we've said it before, like Tahm Kench, Soraka, it's the sort of list that sometimes at a really great advantage and sometimes it's at a disadvantage, and this is clearly one of those decks. Like, not a lot of things stop 8/8s very well. When Soraka Tahm Kench was added to the game, you know, decks that were able to very quickly summon big units like this weren't really a huge deal. Even I think at the time, Deep wasn't a huge part of the metagame. And there's another set of Watchers coming, Frozen Thralls coming through, and that's going to be a 0 mana Watcher in hand that Gamebreaker could develop.
And Hipster Waldo has finally a landmark on his side of the board, but is not the correct one. It's an Entombed Tahm Kench. He was looking for the Star Spring. That's not the one he was hoping for. You have to specify when you ask the genie for a wish. You have to say what landmark exactly you wanted. He did not get the one he was hoping for, and I think it's game here. I mean, looking at the army of Thralls on the other side of the board, looking at the fact that there continues to not be a Star Spring, draw after draw after draw. They're at the very bottom of the deck, and I think Hipster Waldo is already mentally prepared for this defeat and has to really just fight his way through the losers bracket. We mentioned the fact that this deck might have some problems against certain matchups. This loss is not going to be so much that case. It's going to be more just your deck beating itself.
Still, and just to add insult to injury, gets one final draw, no Star Spring, and they're all in the lower half of the deck. Setting up the Watcher ahead of time like this also plays around Hush, of course. So you just get the open attack to obliterate the deck, so there is no hope of Star Spring coming through. Yeah, so Hipster Waldo just has to sign off, has to take that really heartbreaking loss there in game 3. Drops his head to Gamebreaker, who will advance to the next stage of the upper bracket.
We'll be looking at the bracket to see what the outcomes look like for now. We did see, of course, Den moving forward to the winner final. So Den versus Gamebreaker. That's already, it could be a final, definitely. I'm not surprised to see both of these players making it that far. In the losers bracket, we see M8 Asher beating Trish Fangirl. So Trish Fangirl is already out of the tournament. And Pepsi Cola as well. The legend from Portugal is out. Petish, the Russian player, able to defeat him. And we'll be seeing Hipster Waldo versus M8 Asher and Raxitos versus Petish in that losers bracket, trying to advance through and trying to see who's going to be able to face, the loser of Den or Gamebreaker.
I mean, Hipster Waldo, right, has Aurelia Azir, so like having that trump card, having a deck with such a strong X factor to it could be very easily the thing that carries him through the losers bracket. In even that last game, it looked pretty bad with the thralls and everything beating up Soraka Tom Kench, but if there was a Star Spring there on turn 2, that game maybe plays out a little bit differently. Despite everything, the game still went on pretty long. And when you give Soraka Tom Kench enough time like that, and when you make the ice shards and everything like that actually just dead cards you can't cast, it does maybe give them a lot of room to meet that win condition. So maybe we'll get a rematch down the road, but we'll find out if that does come to pass after this break. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fight Night Legends EU Seasonal Smackdown. We're just about to take a look at the winners' finals between Den and Gamebreaker, two very heavy hitters from the European scene. I don't think it's a surprise that they're meeting here at the top of the bracket so far.
And you could say, the two big powerhouse nations in Germany and France. Although maybe France has kind of lost that title after the, pretty sad display in the EU Masters, the only team in that tournament that's yet to get a win in the group stage. So France is definitely not in its best moments, but Den is hoping to remedy that a little bit and put up a good performance here for his country as well. But Germany definitely doing things well in that tournament, has always been a powerhouse nation, and Gamebreaker is, especially with this tournament, seasonal SmackDown, he's the only player I think in EU to have qualified to every single seasonal top 32. So again, not surprising to see him here.
Even the German qualifications for EU Masters, I remember discussing that, and just they have so many top ladder players. And don't get me wrong, like, even if you're showing an EU Masters isn't that great, sometimes great players like Marcus, for example, right, just weren't able to really showcase their skills properly in a team environment like that. When they're flying solo, they get that solo power buff, and we'll see if it pops off. We didn't get a chance to take a look at Karma Lee, which is Gamebreaker's other deck that was brought here. The Karma Lee is like a super greedy, even more value-oriented style of this combo deck, meant for more specific metagames and matchups, and I've yet to see it piloted to the crazy skill that we've seen like Lee Sin Zoe with the Sparkle Flies and whatnot being able to do. But you can see that this deck has even less early game and is really looking to outvalue anything that lets it get too late into the game. And with no TLCs, maybe this could be the meta for it.
A few more spells, and you just rush off of the page there, breaking the Mobalytics deck display capabilities. But I think that's the biggest thing to look at here. Just so many different spells here. Obviously, Ionia and Target, when you mix them together, have some of the best and most versatile spells in the game to being able to do so many different things. And obviously having units like Eye of the Dragon, your two champions, and Slayer Priestess to shore things up. And still, you can find a lot of value, a lot of units to play from Slayer Priestess and from a super cool star chart as well. But still, missing a lot of key pieces here. Sparklefly is not here, Mountain Goat. Kind of a weird mix between, like you mentioned, Lee Sin and Karma decks. And I'm not entirely sure how well it will play out. I mean, it is kind of going all in on this very late game strategy.
Like we've seen Lee Sin Zoe and Lee Sin Karma that like to do very similar things, using Homecoming in the late game to bounce the Solari Priestess, get more reps of that. Just hard mulligan for Gifts from Beyond, let it get Eye of the Dragon in the game early, let that lifesteal token generation carry you. We'll see if it works out, but the players are going to be going to challenge soon. This is the list I don't think we've seen played yet on stream, but apparently it's been working out because Gamebreaker is in the winners finals here. Even to check in on the bracket, looking at Gamebreaker's matches, 2-0, 2-1.
I don't want to jinx it, but this is the kind of deck that, looking at it, you think, okay, everything is fine, but what if you draw only reactive spells in your opening hand the first 2-3 turns against discard aggro? You're kind of in trouble, for example.
Den is the kryptonite, right?
And we've seen so many decks that are built in like kind of a greedy way where if you don't draw the right cards early on, okay, this is obviously not the case. You're going to find Eye of the Dragon early on, you're going to find Solari Priestess, but it can be a problem later on if you kind of only find reactive spells, only find spells that can't really be played early in the game, you'll be in trouble.
And so here's 7 damage on turn 2. Den actually respecting the Pale Cascade, just not going to sacrifice the 3-2, not going to give any value to this Eye of the Dragon. And so now we just have the curve keep on going. Solari Priestess coming through. I like the Meteor Shower.
Yeah, should be
clear
pretty
out
good.
Some of this swarm.
Especially if a Fading Icon is played, for example, would be a perfect 2-for-1. Being able to kill the 1 HP, or even a Curse Keeper we saw before, the proactive kill with the Val Feast from Raxitos when he was playing deep. Could be a similar thing here with a Meteor Shower killing off a unit and popping the Curse Keeper on its own.
Ooh, so Den has a pretty strong open attack here. You can drag the Eye of the Dragon with a 3-2, and then your Fearsome gets to clock the Nexus. With a development here, it does open you up to Meteor Shower, And Den has shown to be a very cautious player, but just goes all in here with the second Merciless Hunter, and Gamebreaker is going to wait. Says, I've got some chumps here. I can't block all of the Merciless Hunters, but I'm confident that I'll still be able to heal after the fact.
And this way you're playing playing around the Pill Cascade with a 4-3 attacking Eye of the Dragon. Even with a +1 health, it would still be dying there. So, yeah, key matchups there from Den with the vulnerables. But Retreat comes in, saves the Eye of the Dragon. You get the double spells played this turn as well, so it activates the Dragon Link coming out next turn. That being said, you're 8 HP, and Den has a board with 2 Fearsomes, so that might be an issue going forward.
This is a huge issue. You've got some of the lifesteal coming through to offset this. You even got the Resonating Strike in hand to give this extra attack and Challenger. You might want to do that reactively next round, because even if you cast the Meteor Shower here, you don't have mana for a second spell, right? To keep getting your Eye of the Dragon, so you have to go for it this round.
And
so
no way
to
kill.
Result in a massive stabilization.
No Glimpse Beyond here either by Den. Not much interaction. Kind of 2 copies of Atrocity, a Nasus in hand, Ravenous Butcher without a great target for it, and the Rite of Calling is not really the ideal hand. Not really a hand that can give you a lot of very versatile options here going into the mid to late game. That's an interesting play that I have not seen in a long time. 7 mana used to discard your Ravenous Butcher into the Dragon Link. You know, obviously stop the healing and still allowed to have 2 Fearsome blockers going into next turn, which means that 8 damage is coming through. 8 damage on the next for Gamebreaker. He does have Guiding Touch to try and survive, really. But then there's a second Atrocity.
Yeah, because you can just open attack, force Gamebreaker to spend a bunch of mana. You can just play Nasus on top of this, another Fearsome blocker. A lot of slays haven't gone through though, right? Nasus is only like a 3/3 or a 4/4 at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe even a 5/5, but that's enough when your opponent's on the ropes like this.
And when your opponent doesn't really have Fearsome blockers, we talked about the deck building sacrifice for building a deck like the one Gamebreaker is built. You don't have Mountain Goats, for example. You're relying on Pill Cascades to give you Fearsome blocks. You find a second Karma. That's not what you want. And now you have 7 mana to try and survive a big attack here. It could just be lethal.
Yeah, I was wondering if Karma was going to be developed here, just to have a Fearsome blocker. It's a big commitment, and then you're just going into the. I guess Gamebreaker just wants to keep mana open for Falling Comet.
If you're not using it here, I mean, yeah, once you give the pass or the initiative back to Den, obviously with slow speed spells that Invoke gives you, not really a case. The only thing is Hush really is going to be able to, yes, stop an Nasus, get the Dragon Link health, but you're going to take some damage already, and then there's still a second Atrocity in hand that, if you're not careful, can end the game, even on the defense next turn.
Yeah, we've got Hush here that answers the Nasus, the classic answer. Some chump blocking. You can go down to 2. But when we take a look at the stats, Gamebreaker 91% favored to win by chat right now. Despite the current board state, the vote is for the entire set. So they don't believe in the power of Nasus Thresh, and they don't believe in discard aggro getting another high roll. They think Den used up all of his luck in that previous set and is going to start low rolling from here. Just a little bit of healing coming through, but when you're playing Lee Sin decks, you can't be afraid to have your back against the wall.
And we're back to 8 HP, so we went full circle after going to 10, then to 2, then to 4. Now we're back at 8, same place we were last time around. And obviously, the closer you get to the late game, the better it will be for Gamebreaker once Karma hits the board, once you're able to take over in that regard. But I'm not so sure we'll make it that far. Still 6 mana up. You have the chance to Falling Comet to have an Obliterate effect ready for Thresh if he does come down. And the hand continues to be awkward for Den. What do you really do here? You play Thresh, it gets killed. You don't have a Glimpse Beyond to capitalize on it. You can't play Ravenous Butchers even. And now there's a Fearsome blocker as well for Gamebreaker.
This is a very, very spooky game. Just Den maybe even feeling the pressure, right? That this Eye of the Dragon is going to make things slip out of his grasp. If a Lee Sin hits the board here soon and starts challenging these units, finally the Meteor Shower being brought to bear. Now with the Thresh in play, having a Fearsome blocker is, like, not going to be an issue. So there's still 4 damage being threatened directly on the Nexus, and if the Eyes of the Dragon can't keep up, Atrocity is still a big threat. When you're so far behind, it's hard to keep that 4 mana open for deny.
Concussive Palm is a great pickup here to stop the Thresh from killing anything really, and to stop, delay a little bit of that combat so less kills happen. I think definitely there won't be a leveled up Thresh attacking this turn, and the next time it does attack, it might be too late. You'll have, very clean answers like the Falling Comet, or just Karma being on the board.
And so you do have the box, right, to clear the Dragonling if you wanted to go for something heavy like that. Taps under Atrocity, so no worries about it this round. So this gives Gamebreaker a lot of extra mana to work with now.
All of a sudden, the Thresh level up is very much a possibility. You have the Cursed Keeper coming down. You have the Bloody Caretaker. The double Ravenous Butcher could just eat up the 2 1/1s, or just cycle one single unit, just to get the Thresh level up happening. That being said, Concussive Palm will very cleanly answer it, and will stop the actual attack coming in from the Thresh.
So Blighted Caretaker comes through. Gamebreaker's been taking this very slow. Sees the threat of the level up. Falling Comet comes down on the Thresh. There is no Glimpse Beyond, no Atrocity to react to this, and it's just a matter of surviving against what's currently in play. The Saplings get to drag the 4/1, the Charger, and the Dragonling to the end of the conga line, and there's going to be 5 damage sneaking through at the top end here. Finally, Eye of the Dragon does go down, however. Only 1 has been drawn. No Gifts Beyond as well to fish another one out of the deck. So all the healing has been spent. And we're on round 9. Still 1 more round for Karma even to start popping off here.
Slayer Priestess can come down as a blocker, but again, Palm will be pretty good next turn to stop a possible open attack if Den thinks he's going to have lethal off of that. The Karma going down here kind of proactively does make her a bit vulnerable, but there isn't much in this deck other than Black Spear that can do it for Den to just kill it right away before it becomes a problem. There's only 2 copies of Black Spear in the deck anyway.
Here we go. Karma's in play. More attackers swinging through. We've got mana for double Star Shaping and double Concussive Palm. So if there is no open attack from Den, Gamebreaker is able to palm the Thresh, stun it, and get 2 3/2s in play. But Gamebreaker is going to try to go for the lethal here on the open attack. Double Star Shaping to heal for 10.
Is a pretty strong play most of the time. This is obviously getting here right in time if you're Gamebreaker with a level 10, with the leveled up Karma, now doubling all the spells on the stack. Double invokes as well, so 2 times the heal and 2 times the card advantage going into the late game, which it's a point where you might need it, especially when you're creating spells like Soraka's Wish, which is not really the most playable thing going into this late game.
And you still, of course, have the mana for Concussive Palm. You have the mana for Deny. But lets it go through. There is no burn damage other than Atrocity in this deck. You can just chill now, waiting for Den to react. If you let Karma go into the next round, typically, opening yourself up to burn this much mana, it doesn't matter. You're going to get all that value back in spades. There's even a second Karma in hand for Inside of Ages. Maybe even expecting the Black Spear here that's in hand. And Gamebreaker just gonna chill.
If you have 12 mana if you're Den, you play Atrocity, it gets denied, and you have Rite of Negation. Rite of Negation actually destroying Karma because of the way that it denies everything on the stack, not just the 1 copy. So even though there's 2 denies, you're gonna deny everything on the stack, so all the denies are denied. That was a mouthful.
Yep, so here's the Black Spear coming through to clear the Karma. Again, at 4 HP, you have to respect the Atrocity. And so you need to let this go through.
And with the doubles, with the star shapings played here, and how many guiding touches were played before? I think it was like 3. Maybe the atrocity into right play wasn't so crazy. It was obviously you have a 4 attack unit maximum into 4 HP, but I think there's 3 copies of star shaping in the deck, and there are 3 guiding touches. I believe 3 guiding touches were already played before. We saw a lot of them played earlier.
Yeah, just to stabilize and to like get Dragonlings in play. The big issue is that, honestly, it's great for Den. Even if you go for a really crazy play of that nature, you don't have to really worry. You have 18 HP. You aren't worried about getting one shot by a big elusive unit just yet. There's the constant threat of Thresh leveling up. And with so much consistent damage in play, I think that you're just forcing Gamebreaker, not to even spend any mana, because now with the threat of this second atrocity, which, based on the lines of play and that this same card has been in the hand forever, is just continuously threatening everything.
I think you have to do a bit more that last turn if you're Gamebreaker. At least the Gifts from Beyond into Crescendum, for example, into the I Have a Dragon was a possibility. You have that Dragon coming out as well. You have more blockers. Because now, even without the Atrocity, you're just already threatening lethal with open attack, forcing Gamebreaker to commit a lot of mana, and then still have Atrocity backup after maybe you go under deny mana.
Yeah. And like I said, even if you go for an Atrocity and Gamebreaker just spends all the mana to heal and out-survive it, I think that just the tempo you have on board, like these Merciless Hunters have just been so monstrous across the entire game. The list just unable to deal with Fearsome.
There's Star Shaping
and
coming
fishes
in.
Out another Star Shaping.
Lee Sin is in hand again as well. Someone that I forgot was even part of this deck anymore. But Lee Sin is an actual win conditioner part of the deck, especially with the Gifts from Beyond at this much mana, and with Karma on the board, you can get its attack up very quickly with Overwhelm as well.
And so we finally have this Merciless Hunter being removed from the board. We've got the Gifts from Beyond with a Crescendum in hand to restabilize. We've got enough mana open this round to counter the Atrocity. But we can see here, Atrocity and Rite of Negation are both available.
Yeah, it might just be it here for Den. I mean, this is the point of the game, and Karma's not played all that often, but when she is played and when she does level up and when you get to this stage of the game, it becomes a very, just an uphill battle for any deck really, because of the value that Karma generates with healing, with, even things like Concussive Palm, it seems trivial, but suddenly getting 2 blockers when you're stunning a unit and then getting 2 blockers as well, all these effects doubling up makes it very, very hard to come back into the game.
And so there's still going to be one more copy of Star Shaping. With Eye of the Dragon coming out, we're going to get the Dragonlings coming through to start healing for more. And what a just stabilization. Like, this game felt like it was on the knife's edge the entire time. And Den now has only drawn, was it 1 Glimpse Beyond early? We haven't seen Spirit Leech yet. Still looking for the card draw to come out of this list and come through, with only 1 Hush being spent throughout all of this time. You can't rely on Nasus either to get pretty big. Second Atrocity is done, and now Lee Sin threatening to come through and end things. There is no Zenith Blade in this deck. Lee Sin is just going to be controlling the board, running interference, getting that damage through ever so slightly, and with things like Homecoming, maybe you can just move his blocker out of the way, or do some shenanigans there to keep recycling now off of the Priestess.
And there is the Severum getting some lifesteal, making sure that Gamebreaker is going to be out of range of, maybe not Nasus, but pretty much everything else in terms of Atrocity. The Thresh there is Drama Rite of Calling, so not the ideal pickup there either, considering that there is no board space, and the box might kill off the Eye of the Dragon, but really that's it.
Yeah, has to deny this healing, going on to the Lee Sin. And is this how Gamebreaker has made it to the winners finals? Players who are giving so much respect to deny and cards like that in this matchup, that they're just not taking the bigger gambles to try to force their wins a bit early before things get out of control here.
And there is the 5/8 Lee Sin with Lifesteal. You're able to get the box and kill off the Avid Dragon, or just play the Thresh after the fact here once this one gets killed. But some damage comes finally into the Nexus of Den. The big heal coming in for Gamebreaker, 16 HP, obviously much healthier. Only Nasus Atrocities is really an issue here. We've seen one Atrocity played already, and I believe Den is playing 2 copies, so one less thing to deal with almost.
Yeah, so now you can spend your mana more freely. You can start committing to these bigger win conditions, like the Great Beyond potentially. The Severum connecting there on the Lee Sin because he strikes the unit and the Nexus, healing for 10. So that's 30 HP that Gamebreaker has healed over the course of this game, with the double star shaping as well going onto the Nexus. Absolutely huge. And now the Scourge coming through to hold down the fort and threaten to close out. This does grant Overwhelm, so that is going to be the way to finish it. And Den goes down in game 1 to Karma Lee, a deck that was on the ropes from turn 3 and was able to pull it back. Unbelievable.
And I do, I think you have to say that Den didn't really have the strongest opening, didn't really have the strongest mid to late game. There was always these awkward draws where if you had a Glimpse there, you could have got the card advantage. If you had this, you could have. But from the beginning, he had this awkward hand with like a double Atrocity, with Nasus when it was still very small. Double Rite of Calling, I think, was drawn, and didn't have these intermediate pieces for the early to mid game to really apply a lot of pressure. Despite this, like we said, he was very close to winning it, but on the crucial turn 10 where Karma flipped already on the board, you had the star shaping, you had Concussive Palm, you had so many different options to stabilize, and then just not let go. Just continue stabilizing, healing for 30, and obviously winning the game through just choking out your opponent.
And we get to see a repeat here. Den with the Nasus Thresh into Thralls, but Kai, Cursed Keeper, Ravenous Butcher, showing potentially a much more potent opening here. We've got Frozen Thrall on turn 1 for Gamebreaker, however, into the Curator.
That being said, the Avalanche will do a good job of dealing with this board after the open attack. That being said, so some damage will come through. The Claw Can here can trade with the 4/3 even, just to set up the just the board to be wiped a little bit better. That being said, once you do block into the 4/3, you give a pretty good read that is what will be happening. I think Den won't be developing anymore past this turn.
And ironically, the hand is pretty awkward from this point onward. So Den is more than happy to maybe take a turn off, float some mana, maybe figure out what the next play is going to be. A top deck like Glimpse Beyond or something could be huge. Rite of Negation being hovered in hand, but I don't know if you want to play it this early. Do you want to save that for a promising future, or is you're just trying to go in with this aggressive board here?
You can do it on this Avalanche if you wish to. And it might, I mean, you have this board. You know that Thralls have sometimes a hard time populating the board early on. You're going to have, obviously, these Thralls and Draclorns and Clawcan and these huge units later on. But in this early to mid game, if they don't find the right card and they're not able to clear the board because, a deny type effect occurs here, they can be hit for another, 8 or 10 damage next turn. And that makes things very tricky.
And Lysandra shows up on the board just to get a blocker, right? You still can't block Fearsome on the Bakai. This was definitely a piece that we saw missing from the previous game. The way Fearsome can bully these sort of chumpy decks out of the way. Still a lot of damage being put through on the sides. No Ice Shard being cast to wipe the 4/1.
Tavern Keeper is there to heal, so it's not as bad as it looks. Obviously, when you're at 6 HP with Atrocity in the deck, any kind of Nasus Atrocity combo becomes lethal, but with Tavern Keeper, you're able to maybe up that range a little bit more.
And this is getting pretty terrifying. Now that you're at 6 HP, any sizable threat with Atrocity could be a thing. Den most likely is going to respect Flash Freeze and things of the like. Getting a closer look at Gamebreaker's deck. There is actually only one main deck Flash Freeze, but 2 copies of 3 Sisters. So you could perhaps take the bigger risk on the Atrocity here. We'll see if Den has adapted to be perhaps more proactive, a bit more gambly with the atrocities here. But 16 needs to be dealt with here.
And right away, we're on turn 6 already. You know, most of the homework has been done by Gamebreaker. He has taken a lot of damage, that is true. But like you said, really Atrocity is the only way to push through damage. Now you're going to have these big bodies. Maybe now going wide might be an option, possibly. But yeah, that's not going to be the case with 4 units now being played. The Tavern Keeper for some extra healing as well. The Nexus being tough now thanks to Lissandra.
It was looking pretty touch and go there during the early game, thanks to that curve with the, with the avalanche not connecting. But promising future swung this game back. The 2 8/8s coming through. Despite everything, this stack also can't deal with these big units unless they have their Nasus in play. This is a very nice showcase for Thralls in the meta here.
You have as well the double Ice Shard this turn, or just the one of to kill off the 4/1 there if you would like to. Also just to damage the Nexus for Den. You have the Tough still, while the Hunter still on the board. And Den, of course, does not. So that would slowly creep it down. But even just with the 8/8 Thralls and the possibility of 3 Sisters and the Fury of the North next turn should be enough to end the game on the next attack token turn for Gamebreaker. And I have to say, what a change of pace. No disrespect to any players, but these players are playing extremely quickly, which is something that we don't always see in Fight Night tournaments. Sometimes a lot of lull in the action, even though the games are interesting. Each different action takes a long time. With both these players just lightning fast, even with the Karma League game that went very late, it was still a very rapid game. For me personally, I love it. I love, fast action-packed games. No disrespect to Dyna. Wink, wink. Last tournament.
Listen, in Dyna's defense, he was playing Nightfall into like the hardest matchups.
That is true. That is true.
It wasn't like just so much value. There's nothing to do, but those matchups were very hard. But holy cow, what a lightning fast game. Gamebreaker popping off versus Den there with 2 decks that, we didn't think would do very well into Den's lineup. The Nasus Thresh not able to pick up a win. We didn't get to see discard aggro, maybe try to get a high roll there and take it to game 3. Nasus Thresh proving to be perhaps a little bit more exploitable than we realized. And we even saw Garja chiming in chat saying that Karma Lee is pretty strong, especially into Nasus Thresh. We already know Hush, powerful tech, Deny, great to shut down the Atrocity, and we haven't had a deck in the metagame that's done it so well, I think, in a long time. But when you take away the late game of Nasus Thresh like that, and you force it to be just an aggro deck, it relies much more on drawing well, and that opens up a huge window of opportunity to find a niche for yourself to close out or make it brick.
That being said, let's look at the bracket, see what the standings looks like on the lower side. Hipster Waldo takes that 2-0 against M8 Asher, and Pedish takes down Raxitos. So Deep and the only Spanish player are out of this tournament. A very sad turn of events for myself. But Hipster Waldo versus Pedish, that is Seasonal 3 versus Seasonal 2 champion in the losers bracket. So that shows how stacked this tournament is. And the winner of that match, of course, will be facing Den after that in that losers final. But we'll be going to a very, very quick 5-minute break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Fight Night Legends EU Seasonal SmackDown Edition. And for the next match, we've actually got two previous seasonal winners about to go toe-to-toe here in the bracket. Both of these players are fighting to see who can go back up to the grand finals. The winner of this one is going to be taking on Den as well, another seasonal winner, to take on Gamebreaker.
It just goes to show, the quality of these Fight Night tournaments where you have the three European seasonal champions on the losers bracket fighting for their life to make it back up and have a chance to face off against Gamebreaker, the only player to be in all three different seasonals as well. So, yeah, I think just a great storyline to look at. Let's look at the player card here for Pettis, because someone we haven't seen yet in this tournament. Someone we don't know too much about, very mysterious man that doesn't really have a webcam in the tournaments, we don't know much about him, obviously being from Russia as well. Kind of a more separate region in Europe compared to most of Western Europe compared to CIS, but someone that has really performed in all the tournaments that I've seen him in, and someone that I know in the Russian community is considered as this type of prodigy, can't do wrong type of player that always brings his A game to every single tournament.
Yeah, and so when you have a player like that can play very cleanly, shows up on a scene, and really just establishes dominance in that nature, we're going to have like this just ace meta style player. And one of the decks that was brought by Pettis was Ezreal Draven. This is a deck I thought was actually going to be a little bit more popular this week. After we went through last week with no Azir Aurelia, the deck, kind of being put on the back burner for a little bit. I thought that with the meta maybe expanding and some other things, with Thralls coming up in play, Ezreal Draven shows up with Scorched Earth to play very well into that matchup. The very removal-heavy builds of Ezreal Draven not only give it an advantage against dealing with the Frozen Thralls before they hatch, but with Scorched Earth and Ravenous Flock can deal with the 8As potentially after they come out to play, and then you get to scoop up some of the other big builds, like, even Demacia Targon sometimes. So a very flexible list. Even to this day, there is not a consensus among the top players that this list is actually good, but that the players that bring it are just that strong.
And Scorched Earth, you mentioned it, obviously great against Starspring, going to be great against Deus, for example, but Culling Strike destroys Hipster Waldo's lineup. You have Azir, you have Soraka, you have Tom Kench, and you have Irelia. So really, you couldn't have asked for a better lineup to face if you're bringing Ezreal Draven. I think it's already obviously been showcased as a very, very good deck overall against a huge matchup spread. But against these two decks in particular, has some very clean, mana-efficient answers that you're able to play them, get a huge tempo swing in your favor, maybe buff up, add a counter to your Tri-Beam, and just keep on rolling and keep on adding more and more pressure, maybe ending the game with Farron later on. So definitely excited to see how that matchup turns out. I think with Ezreal Draven, the win will be almost guaranteed. I think he definitely has the tools to really answer any kind of game plan that Hipster Waldo brings to the table. Second deck, though, will be the Overwhelm deck with Renekton, Sivir, and Sejuani, and that is the one that I maybe have a few more questions with. It might not be as easy to get the win.
And so starting off in game one, Azir Aurelia is going to be tanking the Ezreal Draven opening from Pettis. We've got a much better curve to start. Dancing Droplet into Sparring Student and Azir. No reactivity, however, in the hand. So that means that if Pettis does want to get a little bit disrespectful, pull the trigger on a few removals that might be in hand, they are guaranteed to connect to the current juncture, but a lot of damage being forced through here. It looks like Pettis completely whiffing on the early game.
And of course, still that visual bug there on the Sparring Student. It is a 3-3 right now. We'll be dealing 3 damage there, and already 11 HP for Pettis. Has the Static Shocks in hand, has the Mystic Shots, but opted not to use them this last turn.
Yeah, with the extra manage being floated by Hipster Waldo, it feels so bad, right? When you're when they have the lead and follow or something like that to sidestep your removal. So Static Shock coming through perfectly timed before the Sparring Student gets to grow, and draws the has the Culling Strike in hand as well for this Azir. I think that maybe Pettis, after taking that huge 9 damage, has to pull the trigger here. Hope this connects.
Yeah, and there's really not much that can, Notify is the only thing that really could stop this from happening, really, with Azir's one attack. So very clean answer here. Very cleanly, took some damage early on, but now had the right cards to stabilize, and now has 5 spell mana to work with to see what he can do to stop any more damage from coming in. Has a lot of different removal tools in hand. Another static shock, a mystic shot, and a thermal beam.
Yeah, really, it seems good. It definitely seems good on Petish's side, especially when we consider Hipster Waldo's hand quality right now. But with Petish unable to maybe put on any pressure of his own in return, it gives Hipster Waldo potentially enough time to just draw and draw and draw and start getting these setups where you're attacking multiple times with an Aurelia and blade dancing several rounds in a row. So even if you have removal for 1 or 2 things, there's just too many tokens to stop. Voice of the Risen, new experimental tech in Azir Aurelia to replace Inspiring Martial, just coming down as a 3/4 just to kind of push some extra damage through potentially.
And no level up, of course, so won't be a problem anytime soon, especially not with the Azir death that happened a little while ago. There is the 1/1 attacking with Elusive. You can Mystic Shot it. You would be playing into a retreat possibly. You may be fine just taking the 1 damage there and yeah, going next basically.
But now we're getting into the later stages of the game. Azir Aurelia, once it gets beyond 6 or so mana, things start to get pretty awkward. You have the Blossoming Blades, but it's a pretty heavy commitment. And again, no spells. Hipster Waldo, I think, has actually drawn all units actually so far this game. Not even a Deus to back up some of these Blade Dances that are in the hand. And finally, with just a Tri-Beam tempo play, we are starting to maybe see some life come out of Petish now. Some actual threat coming to Waldo's Nexus.
I think we'll see maybe, yeah. I think the static shock here is safer just in case there's any kind of, buff later on. If you're gonna play on the while your opponent's attacking and you play it as a Shapestone, for example, can really, screw you over. So I like the safer play there. You could have gone for the Thermal Beam onto the Voice of the Risen as well, but without a champion level up, it's really not that risky.
Yeah, exactly. You have the Voice of the Risen in play, and you can leave it alive until things get dicey. Azir is going to be leveled up here pretty soon, just because again all of the units that are coming into play and are just being summoned. Aurelia potentially also. When she levels up, who knows? Hipster Waldo, I think we did get a glimpse of a game where he was pretty far behind and then suddenly brought it back with a big combo turn. No spells even to cycle these dancing droplets to get a little bit of card draw, just relying purely on what is given. I love the tempo Tri-Beams. Another 4 mana Tri-Beam to clean the second Voice of the Risen up.
1 more damage, sneaking through with the droplet, but still, from this explosive initial attack token turn that put it down to 11, and then just taking one ping of damage on the next subsequent 2 attack turns after that. So the pressure has definitely ramped down from Hipster Waldo. We're seeing maybe why this deck now, without Azir, without Inspiring Martial, it suddenly deflates going into the late game, and also just very awkward draws from Hipster Waldo.
That's why some players have also been, and Waldo as well, has been experimenting with Rite of Calling, trying to make the champions more consistently drawn. Petish even just opting to end the round, doesn't play the Captain Farron, just wants to stay wide, wants to stay flexible and reactive. And at this point of the game, typically you can get away with playing your Aurelias and your Azirs so early in the game because the removals just don't line up correctly at the time, or you have enough spell mana to float against it. But now,
I mean, there's
with so many cards in Petish's hand, yeah.
Has the Ignition, has double Mystic Shot, only 5 HP left for Hipster Waldo. We're seeing the hand right now. We know there's only lead and follows as a spell-based interaction, so no way to home to deny. You obviously can't homecoming a Mystic Shot, and no Notify in hand either. So we'll see what Petish decides to go on, if he decides to go for double Mystic Shot, if he takes it slower. But the lethal is in hand.
And Petish, of course, it's when you have the burn lethal, you usually wait until your opponent taps all the way down. Make sure there's no Notify to disrupt that, or you are just going to try to let your board do the work. Wait until you're being forced against a lethal to expend that burn. Yeah, even cashes in a Mystic Shot to answer the Aurelia. If you do lead and follow to save the Aurelia, you can't replay her this round, and it's just another batch of blades coming through. Hipster Waldo opts to draw a card off of the only spell that he has drawn so far this game. Gets the sparring student, and that is not going to be enough, unfortunately.
You can use both flawless duets here, but without any kind of buffs, without any kind of dais on the board, I'm not sure this is, the menacing late game combination of cards you're trying to play to end the game, and your opponent's at 9 HP. So Pettish taking a slow surrender comes in from Hipster Waldo, and like we mentioned, Ezreal Draven, I think, regardless of the deck it faced, would have a good time, would just go on a killing spree. It was initially a very good start, a lot of tempo from Pettish, or from Hipster Waldo, but once you're able to stabilize with static shocks, we saw the Culling Strike being extremely effective at denying Azir before it could become a problem. It was a pretty easy and clean game, I think, from Pettish.
The list really it's like night and day. No Deus, no Azir. The list it's a completely different beast, and just a sequence of units and units and units, no spells to back them up, no Deus to really make those blade dances and attacks feel a little bit more impactful, meant that, even by taking that early tempo loss, Pettish was able to slowly catch back up. And so Aurelia Azir going to be trying to get a win against Overwhelm, one of its natural predators.
And some great cards to have in hand by Hipster Waldo. Double Sparring Student is obviously, you can definitely ramp this into a big advantage going to turns 3 or 4. You have the Azir, you have the Aurelia, you have the Homecoming for a potential surviving a lethal later on when there's a big Overwhelm unit with Battle Fury attacking you. You can bounce it if it doesn't have Spell Shield and just survive for one more turn. That might be the turn you need to win the game yourself.
Mm-hmm. And Waldo here is happy, I think, to play the Sparring Student into the Rockhopper. Sets up the Aurelia and Zir to be a lot safer. Notably, Pettish's version of Overwhelm doesn't have the Ice Shard tech. And it is pretty scary to develop the Azir here because of things like Exhaust.
But I mean, there's not really going to be a 5 attack
it'll still survive.
So you'd have to have Exhaust and Shapestone, which is, of course, would be the nuts, and you'll be able to kill Azir. But losing that 2 double card advantage just to kill Azir maybe wouldn't even be that crazy for Pettish.
Mm-hmm. And Waldo, after getting burned so hard in that previous match, is wanting to be more proactive with developing the Azir and getting the Aurelia curve to kind of close out this game before you get to the late game, right? And so there was a line, where you just don't play the Azir at all, go into the next round with 3 spell mana, so you have the Nopify or the Lead and Follow to protect. But now with the attack token, we have some pretty strong ideas here now with the Flawless Duet.
The Ruthless Raider with a tough is really a big deal in this matchup. Getting it early means that you can take so many blocks and have kind of an engine of your own in terms of blocking these 1/1 Sand Soldiers. That being said, obviously once any kind of buffs come in, that is no longer the case. Then you just can't trade anymore, which is definitely a big detriment. But with Inspiring Marshal nerfed, it's going to be a bit harder to get that going until Azir levels up at least.
Mm-hmm. Hipster Waldo just giving up on the main attack token, of course, respecting the Troll Chant, wants the Blade Dances and the Sand Soldiers just to eventually level up Aurelia and Azir, so it won't be a big thing. Oh my goodness! Instead of developing the Sivir, just goes for the Battle Fury, wants to punch through here, calls out Hipster Waldo. You don't have a good homecoming target, right? Do you want to send that Azir or that Aurelia back to your hand? Takes the hit. Now that Pettish is tapped out, Waldo can set up for a massive combo next round.
I think now, even with Inspiring Marshal on the board, this Ruthless Raider is ready to rumble 5 HP, and the toughness means it can take any trade it wants. But your board is not wide. You still only have 1 blocker, and there's going to be a whole lot of units attacking. Azir and Aurelia will be leveling up very soon. The Green Glade duo with Elusive will also be going in, and now you do have a better homecoming target with the Ribbon Dancer.
Yeah, you've got Homecoming for that. You've got maybe even Lead and Follow to Blade Dance again. And then get another Flawless Duet. Aurelia is going to be leveling up here thanks to all of this Blade Dance coming through. You're going to be able to swap this huge Azir potentially into an open slot if it does get blocked.
So this 11 attack on the Ruthless Raider means that Sivir levels up very, very quickly. If there's a chance to survive here and get another attack token turn with Sivir's Spell Shield, that could be massive. I'm not sure how things will play out this turn and how big, obviously, you're seeing a 7-1 Green Glade duo how big that will be, but it would be a line, obviously, but I think it just might be too much damage coming in.
Yeah, again, because Petish isn't developing here, isn't trying to block, is potentially trying to keep mana open for the double troll chant. Commits everything to Frostbite. The Greenglade duo wants to set this from 8 attack back down to 0, but it's going to get buffed up regardless. Is this going to be enough?
Yeah, I think Petish is doing everything he can, but without playing Sivir this turn, there's maybe a chance for a homecoming next turn, and you're going to be able to deny the lethal coming in. I mean, you might not even survive still. There's still more and more in Ribbon Dance. This is what I mean when I think that Blade Dance as a mechanic is maybe maybe a bit wrongly implemented or wrongly thought out. What attack is this exactly, Scarzig? Are you keeping track? The fact that we can lose track of how many attacks there are in a single turn maybe is a sign of something not being, all that correct in the game. But game 2 goes to Hipster Waldo, as we've seen in pretty much every series he's played. He's lost game 1, he brought a 0 rally game 2, he wins it, and he goes into game 3 with Tahm Kench Soraka.
When you give a deck like that a chance to play the game again, to shuffle those cards and try once more, you can see the dichotomy of the deck, right? You can see when it doesn't draw Azir, like how lackluster it feels, and when it gets the Azir and the Aurelia and starts just beating you down, that's what it wants to do. And who knows, if you don't go for the Battle Fury there, if you develop to go a bit wider, if maybe there is some different idea you can do. But now we've got Overwhelm into Soraka, Tahm Kench. We've got Starspring in the opening hand for Hipster Waldo, who's both of the lists, honestly, that Hipster Waldo has brought have been blessed and cursed by draws across the entire broadcast today. I have not seen Overwhelm into Soraka, Tahm Kench. Oh my, no!
Balanced as all things should be. You go into, I don't know, turns until turn 11. Last time we saw this match casted, doesn't find a single Starspring, doesn't even know what the card art looks like the entire game. Start of the next game, you have all 3 Starsprings in hand. This is how things are in Runeterra and in card games sometimes. This is the luck of the draw.
And it's fight night. It's the caster curse. It's so powerful this week, and it's just, holy smokes. We've seen like the brickiest hands, like
now you have
decks
no units.
that brick in ways that you haven't even. Decks find new and inventive ways to brick that you've never seen before, haven't even have never experienced. There's that saying that like when you shuffle a deck of cards, that the sequence of cards is completely unique because there's so many different possibilities, and the amount of bricks that any deck can build in Runeterra is just utter nonsense. We've got the Fearsomes coming through with the Sivir, a lot of damage coming through, and all spells cripple Starspring.
And no surprises, you have the Shapestone here as well in case Hipster Waldo tries anything cheeky, which I think he has to try because his hand is, again, very one-dimensional. He's only had this single unit to try and do things with. All his cards are targeted cards that buff a single unit, like Bastion, like Pale Cascade. He has to make sure that Crusty Codger survives so he can use these cards even. And, well, I think, Shapestone won't be able to do it now. It's one-off, enough healing for this crowd.
The Pale Cascade was very clutch there.
I guess, you can
just goes forward anyway.
Help Sivir survive. It is going to be important, obviously, but just don't kill the Crusty Codger. So you still have something to Bastion next turn. Great.
Tahm Kench, Soraka? No. This Crusty Codger has a lot of health now to work with, but it could just get traded away, all for nothing. Second Starspring, just play it out. Get another thing of healing, a double acceleration on the main Starspring.
The Rune Runner coming in, of course, as well. The Star Shepherd, even though it might gain a lot of attack now with all the different heals here, it can just be, killed by the Rockhopper, unless, maybe a Bastion or Astral Protection is played on that unit as well. Again, this is a deck that has to find the right balance of cards, and both times we've casted it, at least the last 2 times, it's had a lot of one thing, but not a lot of the other. Has a lot of Star Springs now, a lot of secondary units, but not the actual champions that you need that you want to use as Bastions and Astral Protections on. That's
All
another
right.
crab. Another crab attack.
And they're both, yeah, and they're both vulnerable. They get dragged to the side. We've got Sivir about to level up. So, I mean, what do you do here? Rockhopper pulls the Star Shepherd. Maybe Sivir pulls the Crusty Codger, and then you just swing through.
I think you're not really thinking to end things, very soon. So you want to play still for value and decent trades. You could, of course, just pull the 2/6 with a Rockhopper, for example, but pushing that extra damage, I think, wouldn't be anything close to lethal. And you're going to expect there to be astral protections and certain plays like that Hipster Waldo has in hand here.
Yeah, so another Astral Protection coming through. This Crusty Codger has so much HP.
These Star Springs are gonna start, doing work here with all this, room to heal on these crabs.
Play the third Star Spring.
This is now you have to adapt to what the game gives you. If you have to do it with 3 Star Springs and no champions, that's how you have to do it.
Yeah, and so just an open attack to clear those before something happens. A lot of the healing from Soraka Tahm Kench is going to be at like burst speed anyway, so you could maybe try to develop and go a bit wider there with the second Rune Runner. But Petish maybe just feeling very comfortable at where the game is at right now, and just wants to hold the second Rune Runner for a surprise. This is one of the only times you're maybe going to be able to cast the Preservarium. And so, yeah, just get some extra card draws. Should be fine, but what's the line now? You can shake down, and you just have to pass. Do you shake down and then have the 2/4 trade up into the or do you use it to pop the spell shields? So maybe you can get a Hush if you get the top deck to stop the overwhelm.
Yeah, it's a tricky line here. I mean, I don't think... Yeah, you'd have to have like a Soraka Switch to try and win it just through healing this one crab. Even with a triple heals from Star Shaping, it won't be fast enough. It's just awkward. It's obviously very, very sad to see, but we've seen a lot of games in today's tournament just come down to draws really and come down to really high roll starts as well, with Den earlier on getting some crazy wins with Thresh Nasus and discard aggro, and now kind of the opposite for Hipster Waldo.
Oh yeah. That only pops the spell shield, so you can't get the drag there. I was wondering if you would go for if you would pull the Merciless Hunter, maybe put a Bastion on that big Crusty Codger to get the trade into that fearsome unit.
Yeah, that would have been, I think, a decent play. At least to maybe have some outs on the top deck. Because without it, you're just not stopping all this damage. And now you would drag, of course, the 2/9. You would drag out the Rockhopper and just go for the maximum damage with the overall units.
Yeah, and then overriding the Preservarium, recognizing like with the shakedown like that. 19. Hang on a second. The lethal's about to happen. If you could survive one more turn, it would have been enough.
Yeah, there won't be one more though. With this big swing coming in, with the exhaust, you can choose the exact blockers you want.
Yeah, and then the permanent vulnerable from the Crusty Codger from a long time ago, just allowing it to be dragged to the side. Tahm Kench showing up in the hand at the last minute just to laugh at Hipster Waldo's fate. Unfortunately, unable to get the win with Soraka Tahm Kench here in Game 3. Honestly, even if you had removed the Merciless Hunter, right, it wouldn't have been enough.
Yeah, no, way too much pressure mounting up and not being dealt with all this time, because Tahm Kench plays kind of its own different game style or game plan. But when you don't really capitalize on your own game plan, then it just feels bad, like we saw last game. And this is maybe the reason why Tahm Kench Soraka isn't being played so often now. Obviously, things like Edge Draven, Landmark removal being somewhat prevalent, but also just the fact that you might just lose the game yourself, kind of with Lee Sin sometimes as well with the draws. It's very dependent on one singular strategy. If it doesn't work out because you got countered, because you didn't draw it, suddenly the game, or you just can't win with it, basically. So yeah, unfortunate for Hipster Waldo does get eliminated from this tournament. Petish moves up, is now going to be facing Den, so seasonal champion number 1 versus seasonal champion number 2 after this break. Stay tuned, we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fight Night Legends EU Seasonal Smackdown. Speaking of which, our next match is going to be once again two seasonal winners going against one another. We've got Petish, who just advanced against Hipster Waldo, taking on Den. The winner of this match will face Gamebreaker in the grand finals.
And looking at the decks that these players have brought, we just saw Petish do it with Overwhelm and with Ezreal Draven, and now we have Dan with Discard Aggro. We saw the good of this deck and the bad. And the good, when it really goes off, is really one of the more high roll aggro decks in the game, and also has a chance to come back into games later on as well, which is why it's one of the, I think historically, maybe the not the maybe flashiest aggro decks, not like these like all in like spiders, etc., but a deck that has been seeing consistent play rate and win rate for a year now. I mean, ever since the Jinx rework, and it really hasn't been nerfed or touched at all. I think devs and I think players are happy.
Yeah, this deck has, I think, gotten the most direct buffs of any archetype.
We just look at an entire rework with a whole discard package on Urchin and the Jinx, etc. But definitely worked out, and the deck has been seeing play since then and really just performing very well in the hands of good players. Especially, it can really just ramp up to the next level.
Yeah, and then with the standard swarmy aggressive package to go into crowd favorite, Den has brought the extra spice of survival skills and also suit up, two cards that can really blow your opponent out of the water when they're trying to fight you for tempo or go for a line they just aren't expecting those cards, or their back's against the wall and they can't afford to play around them. And Den has shown that even when the deck does not draw well enough, you can make miracles happen just with a clutch top deck augmented experimenter or getting a Jinx in the late game to get that final rocket or two to close things out.
And the second deck that Den will be bringing will be a Thresh Nasus deck. So both Discard Aggro and Thresh Nasus have this chance, and we've seen it in this tournament already, to really just have the dream opening and almost end the game at that moment. It doesn't matter what you're facing, if it's a good or a bad matchup. If you have these kind of very high roll dream openings with the right combination of cards, and your opponent may be having a bit more of a brick hand, it could just really be a non-game to start things off, which is sometimes obviously not a great thing for viewers and casters. But for players that are just getting, free wins in a tournament that really does matter, that is an upside that you do want to have with some of your decks, obviously.
The philosophy that's come from a lot of players, right, when it comes to Fight Night and just tournaments in general, is that when the meta is in a certain spot, matchups are very close, the player's skill is very high, you need perhaps to bring a list like this that can sometimes just get a high roll win, where you take away your opponent's ability to play because it's a weird sign of respect. Your opponents are so strong that one of the ways to consistently beat them is to just try to end the game before there actually is one. And when you consider Nasus Thresh and Discard Aggro, these are decks that can close out games, but are also decks that can get handled very easily by Overwhelms and by Ezreal Draven. So both lists, I think, are set up for success in this matchup, and it's really, again, going to come down to how the draws even out. If we get perhaps, Discard Aggro with a decent-ish opening against perhaps Overwhelm with a decent-ish opening sort of thing,
things are happening here, and this is something that we've seen before. Petish has to get some clutch draws in the next two turns, or the Preservarium if it is played, because right now he has no playable cards whatsoever. Turn 2 he can play Preservarium, a landmark that doesn't have you're not blocking anything, could be an issue. So top deck here is going to be very crucial. Troll Chant is not it, and we've talked about this. Decks that have a good curve, but sometimes if you don't have a good opening and your opponent has a good to great opening, you're in trouble. And again, no playable cards. Troll Chant, no units. Draven comes down on turn 3, attack token for Den. This is high roll Discard Aggro in action.
The Zonite Urchin was played on turn 1, and at the very least there wasn't like a Jury Rig or a Flame Chompers brought into play, but you're one vision off of winning. Den even has the crowd favorite in hand. Actually has a Flame Chomper here, can go for Rummage to swing through against this Renekton. Renekton is strong, the Overwhelm is good, but he can't 1v5.
There's the Axe Flame Chomper coming in.
And that's going to get the full board into the crowd favorite. There is a Ruthless Predator now. forced to cash this in.
And then what do you do on defense? You have no units to play. You're still being attacked. If a vision is drawn, there's a rummage there as well. There's still an axe even.
Yeah, so this is lethal in hand. There's triple troll chant. And once you're on the back foot like this, you're spending all your mana just to survive. You can't develop. Overwhelm. This is a deck. This is how it loses most of its games. Is GG. No early game.
Game 1 goes to Den with discard aggro. And I don't want to say I jinxed it or I caster cursed it, but we've talked about it. Decks that do have a good early curve have a chance to fight for the board. But if you don't draw the right cards, if you have a hand like we saw there, that it can happen with Overwhelm sometimes. You have Renekton's, you have Troll Chants, you have Battle Fears, you have Perseverance, you don't have any of your early curve units. Discard aggro is going to blow you out of the water. And we saw it there. 2 attacks is all you need.
Mm-hmm. And certain decks, like, again, they... Discard aggro, that's what it wants to do. It wants to punish these decks that have been cutting away their early game in order to run more late game to exist against these like control decks and things of that nature. And even these mid-rangey builds that have some early game aren't running enough. And so now going into game 2, Petish at the very least has a 1-drop into a 2-drop, but Den has Bakai Reaper, Cursed Keeper, Ravenous Butcher, and a Black Spear for a little bit of tempo. Besides, it looks to be another aggro throwdown here.
And a bit of a better curve. You have the Ancient Yeti as well to stabilize in the mid to late games. Sejuani also, but the next few draws will be important here. Another Cursed Keeper is great for Den, but he needs another activator. Going to be a big attack here with the Ravenous Butcher, with the Bakai Reaper. Obviously, all of these units trading well into the Raider, not so much into the Omen Hawk.
Yeah, and if you force Petish to trade away this Ruthless Raider, any other top decks like Fearsomes and stuff you get down the road are going to pay dividends. Something like a Merciless Hunter to just keep forcing through. The early units trading away are still Slay procs. Even playing, like a 6/6 or 7/7 Nasus on curve could be enough stats to survive here.
All right, finds an actual playable top deck there from Petish, so very key just to have a play because you can play Renekton this turn. Has the Rockhopper here, has a vulnerable onto the Curse Keeper. There wasn't really actually an activator there for Den, so does end up helping him by killing off that Curse Keeper there. And yet another big attack coming in with a Black Spear, like you mentioned, as backup to control the board once this swing comes in.
Yeah, great way to block the Bakai Reaper. Just get that off of the board. You can chump, but you're just kind of taking the damage anyway from the Bakai Reaper. And the Black Spear will be active.
Regardless of how fast these games are going, the players are also just playing very fast. Their decision-making is on point for both players. I think there's no real misplays happening. I think it's just, games kind of, they have maybe a more one-dimensional or like tunnel vision type of game plan right now. So it's just very quick back and forth from both players. Both players already have maybe played these decks and have a lot of experience on these decks in ladders and in tournaments, and they're very familiar with all the different plays they can make at a certain stage in the game.
So the Shapestone was traded in early, so no way to protect Renekton from the Black Spear. But despite that, Petish still has a good curve from this position. A lot of damage done early, but I think you maybe have to attack here. If you attack, Ravenous Butcher blocks, and then Thresh gets to clear the Ancient Yeti. So this way, you maybe bait Thresh into pulling the Yeti instead, and then you can blow up with the Battle Fury. If there is a development from this point, Sejuani gets to come down. If you're Den, do you just go for an open attack here, force through 7?
If it would have been a Ravenous Butcher onto a Ravenous Butcher last turn, you'd actually be forcing lethal. Of course, there was still mana up for both players, so maybe not the greatest play to make. But at this point now, you're 1 off, and you're not going to be killing the Ancient Yeti here either. Thresh obviously won't be leveling up anytime soon with the current hand that you have, so I think it's fine to go for this burst of damage through, and now know that, at any point in time, Atrocity is going to be lethal, not just with Nasus, but with really any unit.
And Petish thinking, do I want to just take this hit, develop an extra unit afterwards, try to go wide, fight for board, or do I want to just get this Nasus off? Because, the Thresh. If you don't answer the Thresh, then Den still retains a challenger unit to mess up your trades down the road. But
yeah, Petish had the consideration to Battle Fury there. kill the Thresh, have a huge Yeti, and have 0 mana, which means Atrocity would have been lethal. He's maybe having to play around Atrocity. I'm not sure if it... I think you just maybe don't play around it, just go for your own attempt at a game plan and try and win it that way, considering where you are. You're at 1 HP right now.
Because, I mean, as an Overwhelm deck, you're like under the threat of Atrocity constantly. So there is actually, to just take a quick look, I think Petish is running...
There's one
copy of Three Sisters. There is Troll Chance to maybe take the edge off, but now at 1 HP, you need like exactly 3 Sisters against the Atrocity. And now with Spirit Leech and the Glimpse Beyonds coming through, Den is, after running, just about to run out of cards, is now hitting the stride here of Double Glimpse.
And of course,
Petish getting some units down now. This could be a good turning point.
Thresh being killed off first just to give a chance for it not to level up. I'm not sure how far it is right now. Maybe with Glimpse Beyond you're able to level it up in time, but probably not. Even then, yeah, you're just going to glimpse the Thresh here. Not glimpse the 1-1 because, you know, it is an Overwhelm Doomage coming in. Another Glimpse Beyond here. So you have all the card draw you want. The right coming in as well, and the Nasus going to be almost at that 10 attack range.
Yeah, 10 attack, swing in. And even though you're worried about the Battle Fury, maybe trading up into the Nasus, it's only 1. You can go for Rite of Calling here, look for Siphoning Strike.
And the biggest thing here is that with Sejuani, you might think, okay, I can Frostbite. The Nasus is one turn, I don't have to think about Atrocity, but because you're at 1 HP, it doesn't matter. Every single unit is a threat, obviously.
And yeah, it's just a beautiful curve from Den, and we've seen Nasus Thresh also brick pretty hard. And when it gets to a situation like this where you've got plenty of fodder for your Glimpse Beyonds, you're just cycling through your deck now, looking for that Atrocity. Den's running 2 copies. There it is, the Atrocité, for those in the French community.
There is a response. There is a possible, you Atrocity, they have 3 sisters, suddenly you don't have Atrocity anymore, and you're in big trouble. So maybe you have to, consider going to the line of leveling up Nasus and having that spell shield available.
Yeah, so just gets to swing in here. You put Nasus down at the bottom of the sack. Because these units at the top have to be blocked, Nasus is going to grow here. And this forces the Battle Fury, right, to trade up into this after the fact.
And now with only 3 mana up, you can very cleanly Atrocity here and know there's going to be no response. You'd need 4 for the 3 sisters plus the Flash Freeze. So that's going to be, very clean play there from Den, forcing the response from Petish first. And now getting the kill with Atrocity, the game 2 win. And Scarzig, this series is over. That's a 2-0 win from Den, destroying Petish with 2 decks, with Discard Aggro and Nasus before he even had a chance to fight back.
Yeah, the Discard Aggro did what it needed to do, and Nasus Thresh did the same. The Overwhelm whiffed in that first game, no early game to stand up, and even with a decent-ish curve to kind of fight back against Nasus Thresh, just too much damage around the sides, right? When you're even if you're playing like units with good stats that can kind of combat the 3-2s and the 4-3s, stand up to the fearsome units, you're still taking so much damage just because Nasus Thresh not only has decent stats for the early mid game, but also more units on average than you. So you're still taking some damage over time, and not really counting on having answers for the Atrocity meant that you just have to play a very straightforward game and see who comes out on top.
And that will be Den going back up to the winner's bracket. That was the loser's bracket final. Things have never gone this fast before. I think the breaks are going to be, a bigger part of the content than the actual games at this rate. It's getting faster and faster. It's like these, these videos where you say something, it speeds up. It's kind of like that, I think. But moving into the winner's final, it will be the repeat of Den versus Gamebreaker. Things were a bit, I think, predetermined in the last match we saw, where they were also kind of non-games against Den in that case, because he had very bad draws with both Thresh Nasus and Discard Aggro. This series, it was the opposite. He had fantastic draws, and we did kind of maybe caster curse that a bit, but we'll see how that grand finals ends up playing out after this, I guess, another very short break.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fight Night Legends EU Seasonal SmackDown Edition. And congratulations, dear viewers, you are here just in time for the grand finals to cap off today's broadcast. And when to see how we got to this point, we're gonna take a quick look at the bracket. Honestly, with how quick the bracket has gone, this is probably the longest time we've had to actually take a look. Right? I mean, a lot of 2-0s across the board. The sets have been very fast. Den and Gamebreaker meeting in the grand finals. This is actually a rematch. Den was sent down to the lower bracket finals, but was able to take down another seasonal tournament winner to get back up into the top of the set. Gamebreaker just cleanly just won all the way up to the grand finals, only dropping a game to Hipster Waldo so far, and that was on a Zero Relia, if I'm not mistaken.
I think we can definitely change this edition of Fight Nights, the name from Seasonal SmackDown to Seasonal Speedrun. I think that fits a bit better. I think there's going to be some viewers that are hoping to always tune in for the grand finals to hear Scarzig. Lucky viewers, welcome. Grand finals starting soon. They're going to tune in at like 8:30. They're going to be streaming offline and we're like, wait, what happened here? Where's my grand finals? Everything is going a bit faster than we usually expect it to, but it is also exciting, I think, to have kind of fast-paced games where there's not much time to really think and ponder through every single line, and it's more just kind of fast-paced and very pressure-inducing. And I guess the decks that Den are running, I think, is fitting for this playstyle and this speedrun type tournament with both Discard Aggro and Thresh Nasus. Sometimes feeling like a speedrun, sometimes feeling like you're just dying on turn 3 and someone's getting a record broken somewhere.
I know. We're playing the Blitz format today, and when we talk about the format, we do need to also familiarize ourselves once again with Gamebreaker's lineup. Normally, when our grand finalist is locked in from the winner's side, they have to wait very patiently for their challenger to be decided so that they can figure out when they need to play next. But Gamebreaker's jumping right back in with his lineup. Karma Lee being I think, a very interesting outlier here. This deck is favored into way more matchups perhaps than we've been giving it credit for, but just because of the nature of the list is a very daunting thing to choose to bring to a tournament.
It's all about getting to turn 10, and then we saw it, in that last winner's final where this Karma Lee faced off against Thresh Nasus. You get to turn 10 and suddenly you're star shaping, your heals for 10, you have concussive palm that can, give you 2 blockers and also stun a unit like Thresh, for example. So it was very key. And when that matchup, once you get to turn 10, you're able to stabilize, you're not going to let go. You're going to have full control of the game, and your opponent can try whatever he wants, but there's a very low likelihood of you losing control of that game at that point. But the hard part is getting there, is getting to turn 10 with Karma on board.
And just flying by the seat of your pants, having even fewer units than a standard like even Zoe Lee Sin deck. The Gifts from Beyond could come through clutch. Den, as we know, is running Nasus Thresh, and the Bakai Reaper and Merciless Hunter, those fearsome units in the early game, do so much work in that matchup. But we're going to go also, just to familiarize ourselves with Gamebreaker's other deck, Turbo Thralls. This list now has just, within the last few weeks, has just exploded onto the tournament scene. Extasio brought it, really was singing its praises as specifically a tournament-ready deck on Twitter, and we've seen it also just get a lot of play on the ladder against other lists that don't have the means to challenge it in the mid-game.
And of course, depending on the format, especially for example, like EU Masters, because it's competing for a spot against TLC, because Lissandra, you can't play it in 2 different decks, we haven't seen it pop off there. But overall, it's had a huge upward trend all over the place in every kind of format in different tournaments and ladder in the past 2 to 3 weeks. But right away, we start things off with Gamebreaker on Karma, Lee Sin, and Den on Discard Aggro.
The last time we saw this matchup, Karma Lee was just barely able to stabilize, get to the late game, and then get 2 doubled up Karma Star Shapings to get back up to full HP essentially, and then close things out. So we'll see if Discard Aggro has a better time running this one down. Eye of the Dragon on turn 2 with the Pale Cascade to get a trade here. Already setting Gamebreaker up for success.
And getting 1 less unit on the board now for Dan. He was hoping to go for just the full-on Draven into Axe, into Jury Rig, into Crowd Favorite the turn after that. but this suit up might change things. That being said, with only these 2 spiders on the board, not the most juicy targets to hit.
Yeah, I think you just still go for the same plan. Get the axe. Paying 4 mana for the suit up isn't the worst thing in the world, especially when what has been dealt to you here in the hand if you're Den is pretty straightforward, and being able to use the suit up on a 1/1 spider that goes unblocked, or maybe the jury rig, could be pretty strong here. So we've got the same setup of axe into the jury rig and then summon the crowd favorite if you'd like to go for that line.
That being said, the Concussive Palm in hand will stop the crowd favorite from being as menacing as it could be. It will still be a threat later on. You're not going to just deal with it entirely with the stun. But at least for this turn, that could have been a pretty pivotal turn without a Dragonling on the board yet, without Add the Dragon actually summoning its helper. Until now, it could be a problem, but it's going to mitigate a lot of the damage. Not just the stun, but the 3/2 bodies will have to trade into one of the spiders, for example.
There also is the Hush available for Gamebreaker if he wants to go for Hush. To try to clear the crowd favorite, it only has 1 base HP. If you want to maybe trade the Solari Priestess up into it. And when you're looking at a board like this, it's, pretty terrifying. Because the guy with the dragon wants to stay alive for several rounds, so you're kind of down 1 blocker, right? And it looks like Gamebreaker might be opting to just take the damage here.
That's an interesting play. I mean, maybe you want to have the mana to back up Lee Sin next turn with the Lee Sin spell as well. That could be what I'm thinking of here. Might be the line here, just to have some more control of the board. You're going down to 9. You have the Palm later on as a fast speed for any kind of open attack, and that can really get things back in your favor. But definitely a kind of a risky play here.
And Gamebreaker taking advantage of Lee Sin's champion spell here to get Sonic Wave Resonating Strike, is confident that this Lee Sin is going to survive. And this way you're kind of doubling up, right, on the on this spell, so that you can get more Dragonlings down the road. Crowd favorite goes down. Dragonling about to show up and hold things down. But a perfect curve for Den, where you've got Jinx into Augmented Experimenter. No deny on Gamebreaker's side to stop that from going through.
On an open attack, you're going to have the Concussive Palm. If there's a development, you're going to have the Golden Sister. So at least you do feel maybe kind of safe. If you're Gamebreaker, even at 9 HP, you have some lifesteal possibilities. You have a good response to an open attack.
So preemptively, Axe Rummage seems to be the line for Den here to flip the Jinx immediately. Wants to go into the next round, drawing 2 cards, potentially getting the Rocket alongside an open attack. There's a high chance of getting Get Excited or Vision to go along with this. So there's the development, giving Gamebreaker a chance to just go for the Hush on the Jinx. Stops the Rocket. Doesn't care about the Golden Sisters from this point.
You can push 2 damage here by playing the Poros out, overriding the rear guard, and then just playing out and overriding one of the 1/1s, but I'll also play the rear guard instead. And the attack here is a bit stunted. I mean, you do have a big attack. You're going to give 2 lifesteal back from the Dragonling itself. There's 3 mana still to work with for Gamebreaker, so you really can't do anything else in hand other than Guiding Touch. You can't really threaten the Lee Sin. If you attack with Draven, you're going to just give it up to Lee Sin probably. A lot of different considerations here, but I think you do want to push the damage, right? Just go for a full swing, possibly.
Yeah, because one spell's already been cast. You can give Lee Sin Barrier, so it's just going to be a chump.
I guess Kill Cascade is also a problem on the Jinx, for example.
You're just attacking and just letting them lifesteal for more. I think that committing to the early level up of the Jinx rather than going for Augmented Experimenter means that Den is very reliant on the Rockets to close out here. Awkward draws too.
Yeah, can't really make use of the Flame Chompers. The Elusive now don't matter because there's going to be a Silver Sister on the board to at least block one of them next turn. You can't block with either rear guard.
So if you Poro Cannon the Flame Chomper will just fizzle. Then you can play a Daring Poro, and then you have one Daring Poro in hand that you can discard with the Get Excited to get a rocket here. And then the rocket potentially can finish off the Eye of the Dragon as well. And you're essentially trading your Jinx away for the sake of getting a Super Mega Death Rocket here, because Lee Sin is going to take her down, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no counterplay here. Obviously, Get Excited is not going to be able to do it, and even then, there should be spells in hand, like Guiding Touch that we see there, Retreat even, I mean, it's very hard to do anything. Again, we talk about the fact, like the turning point where a deck stabilizes, and it's so hard to continue fighting past that. You have Golden Sister now, you have a lot of different interactive type spells like Concussive Palm and Clear to work around the different,
Ooh, very interesting. With not going for the Resonating Strike to boost the attack on Lee Sin means that they don't want to pull Jinx with Lee Sin, and so this gives the opportunity for the Get Excited to save Jinx here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I like this. I mean, you're giving a chance to both deny the lifesteal and save your Jinx in one move. You have the Get Excited in hand here. There's the Retreat, sure.
But you're still emptying your hand as well. You're getting the rocket. Is this a Jinx's Get Excited? I don't believe it is. No, it's just a regular Get Excited. So saving the Jinx is very high priority here.
The Guiding
2 mana.
Touch.
No Notify to stop this.
You're going to heal, try and find a Pill Cascade is really the only out here, the only option that Gamebreaker has to be looking for here. It was another Palm that was top decked.
Just uses the Guiding Touch on the Eye of the Dragon so it survives this rocket. And so Jinx is alive. Gamebreaker letting Den keep his win condition and no more healing in the hand. The next couple top decks could be clutch here. There's still a wide board to be dealt with to push through some damage. You've got Axe to get rid of the crowd favorite. You can play a Draven here. And this is great to develop, because even if you're forcing Gamebreaker to like have a concussive palm, that's less mana they have for healing. There's no star shaping you need to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
You can even overwrite the crowd favorite with Draven.
I think you just overwrite the House Spider because you're not going to necessarily full swing here with the Dragon Link still on the board and quite a lot of blockers and still 4 mana up for Gamebreaker. You were looking to maybe just push overwhelm damage with the crowd favorite, even if the blocked was with a lifesteal unit, you would still be pushing damage through. But now probably not that appealing. Probably just go for the Draven onto House Spider, maybe just Axe on Axe, get the rocket out, and keep pushing damage. I mean, 5 HP right now for Gamebreaker. No way to heal. Well, he has a Guiding Touch now, but that's basically it. And again, it might just come down to that turn 10 where if you don't end the game here, it could just be, of course, maybe the next rocket, the next turn over. There isn't a clean way to deal with Jinx.
So one spell's already been cast. Lee Sin can get barrier, so something is going to get blocked. You can't attack with the Jinx here. I like the Axe going onto the Daring Porter to threaten the Silver Sister. Yeah, the rocket comes through. This is to clean up the Dragon Link, so less lifesteal coming.
And now you can suddenly look for possibly an attack here. At least with the rear guards, because obviously they can't do anything on defense, so might as well punch them in on attack and try and get some value out of them, try and clear the board on your opponent, maybe force your opponent to make trades they wouldn't want to with things like Eye of the Dragon. Because, I mean, you're at 1 HP if you're Gamebreaker. You can't really not block.
Yeah, you can pass. Gamebreaker's going to want to cast one more spell this turn at least to get another Dragonling at the start of the next round. But, yeah, so it's like, what, Guiding Touch on the Nexus? Or Guiding Touch on the Silver Sister to block the Daring Poro and survive? Goes for the Palm.
Only 4 attackers now here, obviously, with the Lee Sin level up, with the Lee Sin barrier. Maybe it doesn't make as much sense now. Maybe still with the rear guards you would possibly attack, but not as juicy anymore. You can't really force a trade onto the 4-1 at this point either. And it might just come down to top decks for both of these players. Lee Sin ending the game next turn looks unlikely. Again, because this deck is not necessarily built only around Lee Sin. It doesn't have this, Zenith Blade and all these combination of cards like, Mentor the Gem, etc. that can really do it. But that's an easy way to discard a card that's on Urchin into the survival skills. Helps.
Yeah,
the unit
so
survive
again,
as well.
not a burst speed way. So this is going to allow Gamebreaker to give Challenger a burst speed here to clear the Jinx. Really unfortunate last 2 draws. Not able to get that final rocket. Maybe cycling with the Zonite Urchin pulls a Jinx off the top, however, or even an Augmented Experimenter.
And you have the Pill Cascade there now onto the Dragonling. Able to get the block here with a 1-1 onto the 4-1. Just a trade of elusives there, and the Dragonling hitting for 3. Getting Gamebreaker now up to 6. Was at 1 HP before, but Guiding Touch, and now this 3 lifesteal will help get him into at least out of the rocket range, not get excited range for the most part.
And I guess we just have to see what the Zonite Urchin pulls. There is now finally the Deny in hand as well. Oh no, Experimenter lining up exactly into that. Is Gamebreaker going to keep the Deny open?
Looks like he's not. He's playing Retreat here. Just hoping to have another Concussive Palm next turn for the crowd favorite. It's an interesting way that how this card works, or how this spell works, that the fact that you recall a unit, you get the spell back into the hand. But
yeah,
no more
it's not an
Dragonling.
interaction you actually see a lot. It's massive value when you can get it to go off, however. And there is Jinx coming off of the top from the Augmented Experimenter. Another Draven, another Vision.
There's Return being cast on Solari Priestess just to have a blocker. Obviously, no Invoke coming in, no Daybreak effect from this card, but you have at least one more blocker come in.
And I think the open attack with the Vision might be the way to go. You get so much damage around the sides, and then you get to threaten with the Jinx post-combat. You've also got Whirling Death to clear whatever tries to block the crowd favorite.
Well, the Concussive Palm is going to hit crowd favorite for sure. There's going to be one unit on block with Vision, so you will be pushing enough damage through to make it a problem. And to the point where Jinx can end the game if she is left unanswered and if the rocket does come down.
And so you would need to cast the Whirling Death here, right? So you can clear your hand.
That's just game. I mean, you get the 3-2, but you cannot block with it. So there's 2 units unblocked, and that's going to be game. Gamebreaker had no way to heal past that, had no second Concussive Palm, had no Star Shaping, he has actually 3 copies in his deck. So it was constant pressure. Gamebreaker was able to stall till turn 10, but not with Karma on the board, and not with the double Star Shaping or the kind of crazy plays we saw against Raxitos, where you're able to stall there and then you're not going to lose control of the game. At that point, didn't quite reach that level of stability, and Discard Aggro was able to close things out before that kind of switch of the control of the game happened between these 2 decks.
Yeah, the key play that definitely decided things for sure was that turn where Lee Sin pulled Draven and not Jinx. It went the other way around. So that Get Excited was able to save that Jinx for one more rep.
Yeah, that was the biggest deal there, I think. And in fact, there was no Pill Cascade either. If there was a Pill Cascade there to stop the Get Excited from killing the Golden Sister, you have the Lifesteal, you have the kill on Jinx. I mean, just a lot of things there would have gone very differently if there was a Pill Cascade in hand at that moment. But game 1 goes to Den. Obviously this is a attempt at resetting the bracket because it comes from a loser side of the bracket. So has to win this next game, or has to win the possible game 3, and then we have another best of 3 in our hands. If Gamebreaker is able to turn things around, win this game with Karma Lee against Raxitos like he has done before already, and then win game 3, that would be the tournament going to him, of course.
Just going to get the open attack with the Bakai Reaper. Gamebreaker has been consistently getting Eye of the Dragon on turn 2. Doesn't want to just throw the Dune Keeper into that. maybe just going to float this mana, maybe try to set it up to be played alongside Blighted Caretaker down the road. Gamebreaker has double Hush, doesn't need to worry about Nasus, and it's all up to Den to try to be the aggro in this matchup, but based on this opening, it's not looking too hot just yet.
There is the Curse Keeper into double Doom Keeper. Not the usual turn 4, but it's a possibility here to push a lot of damage where Gamebreaker might only be able to develop one unit or no unit. I guess, yeah, Solari Priestess as a chump blocker, and that's really it. Plus the Invoke. Golden Sister will be great for getting some lifesteal later on, getting 2 bodies on the board, but not going to be played in the next 2 turns.
Yeah. Gamebreaker's still feeling a lot of pressure. You have to respect the... not just what is on the board, but, you know, what's potentially going to be developed. Taking the Warrior means that you're going to get something into play 1 round early. You can play this alongside the Lee Sin potentially. A Star Shaping in hand is also nice to offset a lot of the damage that's coming through. Pale Cascade also going to survive. Save the Solari Priestess so that it can maybe get a block down the road. Ooh, Black Spear. This does hover a little bit, maybe shows the Black Spear, maybe Glimpse Beyond, but decides to just let that go through. It's a sapling anyway. You know, no need to save it.
It would have pushed 1 extra damage, though, onto the Bakai Reaper off of the Slay, down to 11, but I think it's, you know, going too aggro-centric. I don't think you have to go that crazy in terms of the pressure you're putting in. Black Spear isn't great in this matchup, maybe because, you know, Lee Sin, Barrier, etc. Not really ideal, and there's not really many other units other than Eye of the Dragon to kill. But still,
yeah,
I think
Eye of the Dragon is probably the big target for Black Spear.
I think it's still a bit too crazy to make that play, and just for that extra bit of damage.
So Bakai Reaper is going to go down to the Warrior here. Den just taking a opportunity to develop, and Gamebreaker passing, saying, I want a better target. So Merciless Hunter going to offer itself up now to get this 5/5 to commit the attack token.
And still 2 mana up here for Gamebreaker, so if a Black Spear is attempted, you have Notify backup still to make sure that this Warrior survives.
So going into the next round, it's still going to need to trade itself away here, right, into the Bakai Reaper.
Now it's going to be some big slay, some big draws. Curse Keeper pop now as well. The extra 2 attack buffs on the Bakai Reapers, and now Gamebreaker feels like he has to do something. Lee Sin does come down now. You have quite a lot of burst speed spells to play out, but you only have 3 mana to work with now for Gamebreaker.
So we've got the potential for the 2/1 to go onto the Warrior just to cover Pale Cascade, if you do really want this to go down so it's not eating the rest of your board. If Gamebreaker does commit to something, taps under Notify, you do have the Black Spear to follow up.
And we'll see what the play is here from Gamebreaker, and if he can keep the Lee Sin alive post-combat into a Black Spear. You'd have to keep mana open for Notify right now. And not commit to anything. It looks like he does not commit to anything just yet. 1 HP for Gamebreaker.
We've seen it before. Gamebreaker going down to the lowest of lows and bringing it back. There is 1 Star Shaping in hand, but no Eye of the Dragon.
Yeah, no Eye of the Dragon. This preemptive Black Spear here going to be canceled by Notify.
Yeah, one of the best targets in the deck. You can hit the Black Spear. You can hit the Glimpse Beyond down the road if you'd like. There is a second Lee Sin in hand, if I'm not mistaken. But just wants to keep fighting, right? You want to keep this in play. That way you have your more mana flexibility for defending this Lee Sin down the road, being able to cast your Star Shaping rather than taking a turn off just to develop another big unit.
And the huge invoke into Moonsilver to get the barrier onto the Lee Sin to make sure it does not take the damage here from the Black Spear. Survives that. Obviously, barrier now off. There's going to be a Slate coming in. Bakai Reaper going up to 3 attack, but still Lee Sin surviving at 2 HP. So some very clutch hits there by Gamebreaker off of the Invoke. Obviously, everything at burst speed as well to make sure there was, no chance for Den to really interact with that combination.
So now we have the Warrior still alive and kicking. Nasus only up to a 5/5 right now. We see a preview there. Could now, with the right spells, just get this Bakai Reaper off of the board, and Dragonling showing up just at the right time. Gamebreaker has to play this slow. this was the situation we saw previously, where now, being under threat of atrocity, you're at -4 mana to cover with Deny.
You have the chance to play Thresh here. You have the chance to play Nasa, but he's not really very big just yet. With Thresh, at least, there's a very full board, so you are going to expect a lot of different deaths to happen after these combat trays go in, and maybe, obviously not this turn, but the next turn you have a double threat with playing Nasus yourself and also having Thresh summon it. And a very reactive hand from Gamebreaker. I mean, no units to play. We talk about this being a possibility. You have Notify, you have Deny, you have all these different burst speed spells, Hush as well, but you don't really have too many blockers. You don't have Palm either, and you're at 2 HP.
Yeah, not enough blockers, no defense. Wasn't able to cash in the spells the last round to safely get a Dragonling to help block here.
We'll be healing up to 7 HP, so taking only 6 right now. Nothing that you can do in hand to change this if you're Den.
And then one more spell for good measure to give barrier to the Lee Sin and protect the Eye of the Dragon. This is also going to be one less soul for Thresh. There's 2 Nasus in hand currently. One of the ways that Den would like to try to push through some pressure is to get the Forbidden Double Nasus, but it's just going to also cash in the Bakai Reaper. Now that we see the barrier coming through, no reason, just let this crash in for free. Get 2 cards off of it, or at least try to.
There's a glimpse beyond that Notify finally used to answer back. I think this is something that Gamebreaker has to do with having a very active hand. You have to really try and, when you have the opportunity to spend these cards and spend this mana, do so. If it does end up, helping you not have like a 10-card hand, it could be happening later on that he just burns Karma if he draws it with just the full hand of spells that you're not playing. You can't really play when you want to. You have to play them when the situation arises that you can, with counters like Deny and Notify.
Yeah, so Lee Sin is now leveled up. Den trying to push through one more damage here. And the stabilization is about to come through. 2 more rounds before potentially a leveled up Karma. There is a Supernova in play. There needs to be one more Invoke, right? There's no Celestials currently to actually turn on the Supernova.
There is the 3rd Doomkeeper drawn. I'm not sure that's the draw that Den was looking for, the high value draw, but gonna have to, he can really play out all the cards here plus Nasus. Lee Sin can push, can more, control the board here. Can't really push for any kind of a lethal. We talked about it before. It's not really a Lee Sin deck. It's more of a mix between Lee Sin and Karma. And you're not going all in on just the attack buffs on Lee Sin.
Yeah, so at the very least, there's no lifesteal here like we saw previously. Just a little bit of piecemeal healing. And despite everything, there's still a lot of slays that have been happening. From Gamebreaker being forced to trade the board, and just from the self-sacrifice that's been going through.
Some more healing coming in. The Guiding Touch comes in. Concussive Palm comes in. A very clutch card to stop the Nasus and not have to even try and put the Lee Sin in danger to block it. And now the board, not as wide, not as scary. And this could once again be Karma it was just drawn for turn 10.
Yeah, and you can play Karma. You've got Hush. Now that you're at 5, you don't have to worry about like these 1 and 2 and 3 HP units being atrocity targets. You can cover the atrocity option by just dealing with the Nasus. And Den, maybe getting punished a little bit like we saw previously when he played this deck into Karma, where there are a couple riskier lines that you can go for to try to push through a lethal when you're just disrespecting your opponent's hand a little bit, right? Like the deck has like a lot of spells, a lot of things that can prevent lethals, but sometimes you just have to take those bigger gambles to try to close out the game before you get into this repeat situation.
There's a Siphoning Strike on the Merciless Hunter, playing around the Hush, which there are 2 of in hand there for Gamebreaker. And the Deny comes in. You cannot play Karma this turn any longer, but your opponent is out of cards, and you feel pretty in control of the game. This is their attack token turn. You've obviously, for the most part, defended it. There's 5 units attacking. You still have the chance to really block most of them here, and Lee Sin has barrier. And next turn, there's only one draw that can happen. Even if it's an atrocity, you have, like you mentioned, you're healthy enough, or you have the Hush for the Nasus. So is this, once again, Gamebreaker getting control of the game? Draws the star shaping. I think my question has been answered. The double heals coming in, and Karma on the board leveled up is a problem, especially when Den does not have card advantage, has only one card in hand, drawing, you know, depending on his top decks, really, whereas Karma is the complete opposite.
Karma double star shaping. Actually gonna go for the doubled up Giga lifesteal here with only one card in hand.
He's going to try and kill the Nasus here with the Lee Sin. Push damage through as well. Doesn't have the Overwhelm, of course, on Lee Sin, so it'll be only 8 damage coming through. Gets the extra bit of lifesteal there with Dragonling.
Oh yeah, and Karma gets to attack here? Wants to sacrifice her to the Merciless Hunter? No. Gets rid of the Bakai. This is a unit that potentially can scale up to become an additional atrocity threat alongside the Nasus. So just getting these out of the way. You still have plenty of chump blockers. There's going to be an Eye of the Dragon coming through. Saving the star shaping, it looks like, just as a response to an atrocity rather than just showing it off here, healing for 10. Goes for a more proactive line. Recognizing the upper hand that you have here and just properly abusing it.
You didn't need to do it right away. You had a better line there with the Sonic Wave, getting rid of the Nasus. If Atrocity was played there, you have the Hush backup still to just deny it completely. And just because your opponent's on their top decks, you're able to really just, well, I guess the surrender comes in and history repeats itself. Gamebreaker gets the win with Karma Lee versus this Thresh Nasus, able to stabilize throughout the mid to late game. And then once it gets to the late game, it's over. I mean, once we saw it there again, Thresh Nasus out of resources and Karma Lee just starting to get into the groove of things, just starting to really take over with double star shapings, with, you can even get card draw with the dementation, with Karma's instead of ages, etc. It makes it very difficult for Den to do anything at that point.
It's wild, like how dropping down to 1 HP and then stabilizing, because being able to cover your opponent's answers so well, floating the mana, having just the right number of blockers in play, it's a deck that's not for the faint of heart for sure. And now we've got Nasus Thresh trying to take a game off of Thralls. We've got Frozen Thrall on turn 1 here, and Bakai Reaper from Den. Both sides off to a great start.
You're going to be looking especially for some activators for the Curse Keeper. Because you don't have it, you're going to go for the Fading Icon instead. This turn, just get some damage in without there being a blocker. Tavern Keeper, double Tavern Keeper is going to be great at stabilizing the mid game. You have a good 3/3 body that can trade into the Abominations or into the Bakai Reapers, for example, and also heal a bit as well. Just to get you to that 8/8 overwhelms coming in. Like, I think that should be enough to really stabilize in the mid game a little bit, and then get you to the late game where you might be able to take over.
And getting to this point where you're just healing off some of the early damage with the Tavern Keeper, developing also a fearsome blocker, I think kind of carries you pretty well into the later stages of the game. We've got Promising Future on this round. I think from a position like this, you aren't under too much threat, and maybe you can go for it because you can Promising Future into Talia. Depends on how scared Gamebreaker's feeling from this position. With no board wipes in hand, just wants to keep developing defensively. Let the Thralls hatch, probably almost naturally. Doesn't need to go for anything cheeky here.
Interesting attack here with the Bakai Reaper as well. I'm not sure if it's the best line. I mean, you're really pushing a lot of damage here. If you do block the Bakai Reaper, you're putting your Tavern Keeper at an Ice Shard range, I guess. And you do want to get the value out of the 4/1 and the 3/1 now, because you don't want them to die just to Ice Shards later on. But it is a bit committal attacking with everything here.
Ooh. So not blocking up front in order to get a value trade on the Bakai Reaper. Maintaining 2 blockers potentially for a follow-up Bakai or Merciless Hunter is really great for Gamebreaker. But that second Tavern Keeper was stacked in such a way that he lost out on a little bit of healing efficiency. We got to predict here. Blighted Ravine looks like a strong pickup, or even the Ice Shard looking at the current board state. Lysandra, also nice, just get a blocker if you think you need more bodies.
It's also good for the Thresh because all these trades didn't happen last turn. That means that all these deaths can happen once Thresh is on the board, and that might indicate a level up for Thresh possibly, especially with Ice Shard killing 4 of the units on the board right now.
Yeah, so promising future does come through, and this is going to mean that on Gamebreaker's next attack token is going to get 2 8/8s. Can actually duplicate with Talia here. If you're trading with the Kindly Tavern Keeper, you do have room on board for it.
But you can't do both Talia and Ice Shard here, so you have to depend, how scared you are of not Ice Sharding this turn if you think you can really survive being at 12 HP already. 3 the boxes in hand.
Thresh is going to pull 1, and then the 3/1 goes into the 4/1, and then you take 6 damage here.
If only Den had 12 mana next turn. He could just box all the thralls. Triple box and kill off all the summon thralls. Not quite there yet. Technology is not there. The mana is not there for Den either.
So the thing is that you're dropping down to 5 HP. There's nothing with 5 attack currently in play that can punish like that. The issue though is all the thralls are going to be swinging through. There's not going to be enough blockers. There's not enough HP in play to stop the overwhelm.
Yeah. Especially with Talia coming down. I mean, it's going to be...
Yeah, so you Talia, duplicate the thrall that's about to hatch, and so you're only going to get... Yeah, you get all 4.
Yeah, all 4.
Yeah, you do get all 4.
Sometimes
I get caught up in the board space issue, but you do get all of them here. And so that's going to be 32 overwhelm damage that Den needs to find a place for. And also, Talia also attacking just is 3 more on top of that.
And the Ice Shard, 1 more on top of that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, even more, because the Ice Shard will damage the blockers as well, so a lot of damage from the Ice Shard even here as well, and yeah, I think this has to be GG. I guess you can write a negation the Ice Shard to stop.
No triple, not enough mana for triple box.
That's it. Game 3 goes to Gamebreaker, wins with Thrall once again, and no bracket reset. We have our Fight Night champion, Gamebreaker, doing it big with 2 kind of, not considered the most competitive, the tier 1 decks, Karma, Lee Sin, and Thralls. I think great showing from him. Den played also out of his mind, but playing 2 decks that sometimes can get cold and can just not have the right answers going into late game against some of Gamebreaker's options. Yeah, just I think a great tournament overall. Very fast tournament, but great play from Gamebreaker.
Yeah, when you're playing Nasus Thresh and you're being forced into a position where you're relying so heavily on, I need to draw this card, I need to draw that card to get your win con to go off. You can't rely on the board you have in play. It really puts a damper on what that deck can do. So big shout out to Gamebreaker for sure for bringing some underappreciated decks, some underrepresented decks, and shifting the meta a little bit more in that oddball direction that we all love to see.
And we'll have to see with Thralls now winning this Fight Night tournament, obviously having a huge upward trend on ladder and just in community tournaments all across the board in the past week or 2. Is this finally the point in time where maybe going into EU Masters this next weekend, tomorrow and on Sunday, do players finally just think, okay, Thralls is maybe a better option than TLC, with players maybe having more comfort on the deck as well? We could finally seeing some teams replacing TLC with Thralls. It seems to just be doing very well in a lot of different matchups across the board, and Gamebreaker cementing this win here might push us further into that direction. We didn't see it at all last weekend, but this weekend things might change.
Yeah, Thralls, it's similar to TLC in the terms that it can, with the right draw, still take down Aurelia Azir. You get the early Ice Shards and things of that nature, a well-timed Avalanche. But a lot of decks aren't targeting it just yet. We've got Ezreal Draven, who just so happens to run Scorched Earth, but we aren't seeing a lot of landmark removal-based decks. Even Thralls aren't running Desert Naturalist to try to get a one-up on one another. It's very interesting to see that we have a deck that, just by the nature of there being so many other things to deal with, has really carved out a niche for itself by not getting targeted. But We will be
Soll
back
ich in dem
with a
OBS
short
Ninja
interview with our
Webcam und
newly
Audio
crowned
anmachen oder
champion
kommt das von Discord
Gamebreaker
dann?
when we get back from this break. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fight Night Legends EU. Unfortunately, if you're just joining us, you missed all of the action for today's Speed Run SmackDown tournament. And we are joined with our crowned winner, Gamebreaker. How are you doing, my friend?
Thank you. I'm doing great. How about you?
I want to ask you
Doing
right away,
fantastic
Gamebreaker.
after watching those matches.
I want to ask you about your lineup because it's not a lineup we expected to be the winner of this tournament. Obviously, Thralls has been getting a lot of traction recently. I think it's gotten out of the meme, naming, and now is becoming a more competitive deck. But the Karma Lee is something I think is more interesting. Karma has been people have been saying she's the worst champion in the game win rate wise on ladder. She's this terrible champion. What is your thought on at first Karma and her current state of the game, and then just this lineup in general? Why did you bring these two decks?
So, so Karma is not in a good spot right now. But I don't think it's because she's bad. I think it's just the meta is not good for her. Because the slow Karma decks, they just tend to lose to TLC and to Azir Aurelia. I actually brought almost the exact list this Karma Lead to last seasonal where I went 8-1 in Swiss because I was just banning TLC and there was no Azir Aurelia yet. I think it's a really good deck. It's kind of difficult though. It has a lot of very close games, very hard to navigate. Like you always like 1, 2, 3 HP and like But yeah, for this tournament, I was just like I've been tryharding to qualify for EU Masters, which I sadly couldn't quite do. But like I've been playing the tryhard decks for so long. I just miss playing the decks that I just like because they just suck against Azir Aurelia. So I was just
Yeah.
like, let's just pretend it doesn't exist. Let's just have fun for this one event after like tryharding on ladder and stuff like that. And luckily, not too many Azir Aurelias today, so it worked out.
I'm glad that it did pay off for you. The Turbo Thralls, I wanted to ask, were you like an early adopter of this list and you thought it would eventually break it in tournaments, or did you kind of pick it up after it got proven a little bit more in the last couple weeks?
I'd say in between. I definitely
Mm.
wasn't one of the first people to play it.
Hmm.
Because during the EU Masters race, I stuck to
Oh yeah, that's true.
the stuff that was already tested and good. But once that was over, I just couldn't see any of the meta decks anymore. That was one of the decks that I played on ladder a lot, and it's actually really good against everything that isn't Azir Aurelia. Um,
Mm.
so yeah.
Obviously, this
And
weekend is still EU Masters happening, and that's what I think a lot of people will be watching this weekend, just in terms of the meta and to see that grows as well. But we're getting closer to the seasonal. You mentioned you had Karma Lee in your lineup last seasonal round. Maybe you can't share everything regarding your strategy and your plans, but what are the key points going into this season that you think people or players, viewers that are watching us should keep in mind if they're trying to compete and trying to make a top 32 cut? Because you're the only player that's made every single seasonal top 32 till now, so you must know something. You must be doing something right.
So one thing I can definitely share is that I won't be playing the Karma Lee deck, unfortunately, because I would love to, but like I said, it loses to TLC and to Azir Aurelia, and you can't ban both of them.
mm.
So I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna bring that deck. Um, I think a major like the three big decks are Thresh Nasus, TLC, and Azir Aurelia. So most lineups should have a strategy on banning one of those and the rest should just be tutored towards beating the other two. I think
Hmm.
that's unfortunately the world we're living in,
Hmm.
because I feel like maybe you're not going to see all three in many rounds, but you're going to see one or two of them in a lot of rounds. So
Hmm.
it's difficult to build for this one, and I think it's going to be hard to come up with something that's like actually really really good. I think at the end you're just going to have to rely on some very close matchups and a little bit of luck in what you're getting paired against. Um, but yeah, the only real tip that I can give is avoid picking decks together that don't make sense against one of these decks, unless
Hmm.
you're planning to always ban that deck.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And are there any other decks? When Turbo Thralls was coming up, it was considered a deck that was good in tournaments and not on ladder.
Yeah.
Is there a deck that maybe you're thinking about that you would say is really strong in tournaments but not so great on ladder, not seeing a lot of play right now?
There's many decks that hard lose to one of the three big decks, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why they can't be played on ladder, just because you run into one of these three almost every game, at least on high
Yeah.
ladder. So a good example is the Thrall deck because you ban Azir Aurelia, it's fine. Another
Mm-hmm.
example of that could be Deep. Deep is a deck that's very bad against very fast decks, but the only really fast deck is Azir Aurelia right now. But Azir Aurelia with Deep is like, it's probably even worse than the TLC against it.
Yeah.
Maybe roughly around the same percentage. So really bad. I don't know how good Deep is into Thresh Nasus, but it's definitely good into TLC and a lot of other mid-range stuff. So that's a deck that people can experiment with. Lee is a deck that sees almost no play on ladder right now because it's just also way too slow against Azir Aurelia. Um, a lot of these kinds of decks, it's mainly like Azir Aurelia just feels like the most oppressive deck um, for ladder, just because it also has the highest play rate I think out of the top three. So it's keeping out all the greedy decks. So um, yeah, any greedy deck and then ban Azir Aurelia is a viable strat if you're comfortable with those decks. They are a little bit harder to play though, because you have to be prepared to play long games and have a lot of decisions.
Yeah, well, I mean, once again, Gamebreaker, I think you did a fantastic job today, bringing two decks that, again, I love to see. At least I think players know this very well from my Twitter, my tweets, and all this. That I love to see spicy stuff. I love to see the best players in the game, not obviously breaking the meta, but damaging it a little bit, kind of showing that there is still innovation that's possible. So I'm glad to see someone finding success, and I think you piloted both decks very well. We saw some very clutch games against Thresh Nasus where you were always on like 1, 2, or 3 HP, like you mentioned, and you're just always able to bring it back and stabilize. So again, huge props to you and congrats on winning this Fight Night tournament. Of course, you will be invited to next week's Fight. Well, not next week's because we'll have seasonal open rounds. So we won't have Fight Nights for actually a few.
We'll
weeks
have
now.
another. We'll have another one eventually.
Eventually, you will be there. You'll be invited, but. Congrats and good luck to you on the open rounds, and hopefully you can make it 4 in a row. Maybe you'll make it in all 5 seasonals this year. I think that'll be maybe you don't win a seasonal, but definitely making it to all 5 shows a lot of consistency, and I think that's in card games one of the best things to see.
Thank you. I'll try.
All right, so everyone, that again is our newly crowned winner, Gamebreaker, who is able to just run it up to the grand finals and then take that final set, sharing his thoughts on the seasonal, on the lineup for this time, and maybe some advice going into the future. So I want to thank everybody once again for stopping by, joining us today for this great match, hanging out for the interview afterwards. But we do have more Fight Night goodness for you down the road. We've got Fight Night NA about to start in a few hours. That's going to be 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, midnight European time. If you're on the West Coast, that's going to be 3 p.m., of course, PST. And then, Boulevard. And no, not Boulevard. No, he's not filling in, is he? It's still Casa and Blevins today? We'll see who NA has. And maybe they'll be as fortunate as us, to have a little bit less Azir Aurelia and some spice. But we will see you next time. Have a good one.